All right, everyone, we got an exciting edition of ADP Chasing today. We're joined today by special guest, the late round quarterback himself, Zachariason. We'll be hitting on risers, fallers, the recent Jordan Addison news, as well as an explosive beef that is rocking the fantasy football community. Let's do it.
ADP chasing is for when you watch ship chasing, you go, these guys are just football guys.
And the targets per outrun leagues, that's going to be really nice.
Actually back in if it's Ashane.
Stare into our crystal ball. Close your eyes, all your entries are going to lose anyway.
Yeah, that's fair.
This is a Deuce Vaughn show.
It's anti-cabal. It's anti the best ball thought leaders. I'm obviously lying to some degree because I have a lot of both of these guys.
It's the most disgusting pick you can make. But man. How we doing, everyone? Yeah, that's still funny every time.
Here's the deal, guys. Here's the deal. Let's just get this out of the way off top. We should not be streaming live right now. NCAA football comes out in 28 minutes.
Yeah, I
so
agree.
whatever our audience, whatever our viewership is right now, whatever our live concurrence are right now,
the numbers are going to plummet.
There's going to be a precipitous drop here in a few moments, including me. I might just leave. I literally have my PlayStation on back over there, ready to go.
Whatever the drop off is, it can't be worse than when we showed the Colts 5-man tight end graphic. It can't be any worse than that.
People were saying that was peak. That was peak.
Yeah. Well, anyways, we're gonna cut right to the chase here. I know, of our thousands of viewers that are tuned in right now, they're all here to hear JJ's response to Soccer Dave, the beef that was started last week on ship chasing. So, JJ, I'll give you the floor here for your response.
Yeah, look, I have an official statement that I'd like to read regarding the incident last week that went down. I'll just read. On July 11th episode of Ship Chasing, Roto Grinders David Kitchen joined the show as a guest. I can't say guest analyst because the only thing that he's analyzed over the last 10 years is Dairy Queen's Blizzard menu. When talking about Derrick Henry on the show, Kitchen said, and I quote, Derrick Henry has been on JJ's do not draft list for the past 5 years. This is simply untrue. He's been on my do not draft list in 2 of the last 5 years, and he was a midseason sell in the other 2. So it's been 4 out of the last 5 years, not 5 out of the last 5. So get it right. But I think it's also important to note that Henry scored 14.5 PPR points per game last year, simply meeting his average draft position expectation. He wasn't even close to a league winner at cost. But Kitchen wouldn't know because not only has he not played in a season-long league since 2014, but his only exposure to football over the last decade has been a 1975-style Tennessee Titans offense. Kitchen still thinks Adam Humphries is a top talent in the league at wide receiver. In the end, I have respect for Mr. Kitchen as a husband, father, and friend. I think he let the ship-chasing lights get to him a little bit last week. I'm willing to move on if he's willing to move on. At the very least, I wish him nothing but the best on his quest to get better at search engine optimization.
Well, it's hard to get worse.
That's big of you, JJ, in today's political climate to try to take the heat off things a little bit.
I think it's important. It's important that we come together and we're not divisive anymore.
Not a bit. When you search "Live a Little Fantasy Football" David Kitchen, the first 5 results are all him on Liam's stream at times last year. 100% fact.
And the 6th is Fantasy Flock.
That's tough for the brand. Oh, man.
It's not ideal.
No.
All right. Well, anyways, we got a lot to cover today, so let's dive right into it. I think, we begged for news all of last week, all of the last 2 weeks, and a major historical event happened over the weekend. Jordan Addison got arrested for DUI. So I think we should touch on this. Yeah. First real news that's happened in a while. He was arrested, fell asleep at the wheel. And again, these type of things, it always is a bit reductive to immediately jump to fantasy, but obviously that's the point of the show. So that's what we're going to do here. I'm curious, starting with you, Corinne, how have you adjusted your ranks at leg up? What do you think the odds are of a suspension, perhaps even later in the season here for Addison?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how to price the odds of a suspension right now. I'm kind of curious to hear what you guys think and want to take in more news on that. But I definitely think he'll fall as a result of this. The first thing I did was kind of pull him down behind, like, I believe I first put him down behind like Deontay Johnson. And then I was on the clock and had the chance to take JSN. And I was like, yeah, I'm just going to do that. So then I brought him behind JSN. And he's still ahead of Keon Coleman for me. I have him comes out in the ranks at 76, one spot ahead of Keon Coleman, just behind JSN. And I've seen him go in the early 7th still. So it feels like I'll be kind of like a mild fade maybe for the time being. I think I would take him though, like if it was my 5th wide receiver at the end of the 7th, where we know wide receiver tends to be pretty much done. I think I would be willing to risk it there. But there was I don't know if you guys saw the link or the Twitter post of he like posted like a picture of him having a mimosa like the day after the DUI.
Oh God.
Which I really, and then obviously you have the incident last year. So that's where I would be like, start to get a little worried. I also heard, I haven't confirmed this, but I heard he like deleted all the Viking stuff off of his socials and stuff. So it's just like the larger situation is a bit concerning.
Yeah. Curious what you think, JJ, either on the suspension risk or, whether that range of where Crane has him ranked around JSN, Keon Coleman, that's around wide receiver 47-ish by ADP, at least, if you think that's about right.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right. My only thing would be, I wonder, like I'm literally wondering out loud. I don't know the answer to this, but I wonder if there is a difference of them finding him like sleeping. Like it wasn't like this like pullover situation where he was caught. It sounds like it seems like it's like a suspicion type deal going on right now. And I wonder if that could play a role in, like how, guilty or not guilty he is of the crime in court or wherever this ends up going. So I think that from that perspective, it's probably favorable for Addison, but from the perspective of like what happened last year and how the NFL is kind of able to be seemingly subjective in some of this stuff. I wouldn't be
subjective is a very kind way of
right.
how the NFL does this.
Yeah. But they do have, what's worth noting on DUI, they do have a pretty like objective rule on DUIs. Like if you get charged with a DUI, it's like immediate 3-game suspension at the minimum. So
right. My thing though is I wonder if from like a lawyer perspective, if like I know that he was like blocking traffic and it's not like I'm not like saying that he did something good. Like that's not.
It was also reported as a DWI some places, which is I know.
I think it's the same thing. It depends on the state.
Regardless, I think it's just one of those things.
Okay.
Like if he gets a good lawyer, I wonder. If that lawyer can do work, but then the NFL obviously has its own like jurisdiction over the situation.
Yes.
I mean, people forget. We literally did this with Jordan Addison last offseason because he got a reckless driving charge. It ended up being a misdemeanor, ended up not being a big thing. But I wonder if that plays into the NFL wanting to do a suspension. I actually think compared to the Rashid Rice thing, I think this is more likely to end up in a suspension, in my opinion. A suspension this season, a suspension that impacts Jordan Addison's availability in 2024.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. It just seems a little bit more cut and dry than the Rashid Rice case. And that could obviously be wrong, as JJ mentioned. Like, maybe who knows the details of this arrest? Like, maybe, a good lawyer can wriggle their way out of it. But yeah, the NFL history on DUI stuff, it obviously does vary. I did a quick Google search this morning, and there are plenty of examples. I don't think I even found all of them here, but plenty of examples of guys who got DUIs and were suspended within a 6-month time frame. Even some examples of guys that got DUIs in season. I believe Kareem Jackson had a DUI in week 3 and then was suspended by week 17. So it really is sort of just a bet on how quickly the courts are going to move in this situation, because if he does get charged with a DUI, say he pleads guilty, the NFL will act like immediately after that. So yeah, it's really tough to like put a percentage on it, but I do think you have to say that there's a 20 to 40% chance, maybe I'll put big brackets on that at some point by the end of the season, this suspension lands. So again, yeah, I just don't know if it's like worth the risk compared. Like you mentioned the JSN example, Crane. That's definitely a guy I would take comfortably over Addison there. Even like the Sutton Samuel range, I think I'm still pretty comfortably taking those guys over Addison right now. It's just, I don't know. It's a huge amount of uncertainty, and maybe it comes from me not loving the Addison bet to begin with. But I do think the late season suspension risk is like definitely in play here.
The chat saying that DWI, DUI are the same thing in California. So I don't know if that's correct, but the DW, and then someone else had, I think, yeah, Ryan Jones said DWI could be worse depending on the state, because that could mean he was high as well. So I guess what I would just say is like the DWI versus DUI distinction to me is just like uncertainty. Like we still don't know the details fully of this whole thing, but that is a good argument for not taking him until we at least know what we're dealing with.
Yeah. It's also like, is Jordan Addison incentivized to, like, if it's kind of inevitable that it's going to happen, is he incentivized to appeal and push this out when the Vikings are in sort of a rebuilding year? I also think like how the rookie contracts work, like you get suspended without pay when you get suspended. He makes like more money in each year of the rookie deal, I think. So he'll like lose the least amount of money if he takes a suspension this year. So I don't know, a couple factors like that where I could see him just pleading guilty
from his
to it.
Perspective, if he doesn't think he can beat the charge, then the best time for him to get suspended would probably be like the first 3 weeks of this season, because it's like you're with Darnold, Hawkinson's out, like when you come back,
people are forgetting that this is really just bullish for my biggest stance of the year, which is that Justin Jefferson should be the second.
Is he the 101 now?
I mean, no, but I think he should rise to where he should have been ranked the whole time, like the 103 or the 104, depending on how you want to play it.
JJ, would you flip him over Chase at this point?
No, I don't think so. But I'm one of the drafters that's just taking guys at ADP in round one for the most part.
Yeah,
I'm doing the same thing other than Jefferson over Chase, because I want to create some leverage, and because we're all going to lose anyways, and it's more fun to win with a cause.
Yeah. And then for the Jefferson thing, I don't know. I was thinking about this too. Like, doesn't the systemic risk of the offense just sucking go up? Yep. Like if Addison's out and Hawkinson's out, like what?
You don't know ball, dude. You were not watching Brandon Powell get 100-yard games with Nick Mullins, bro.
They have arguably the worst depth at wide receiver
so
in the
bad.
league. It's really bad.
Yeah, Jaylen Naylor is going to be prominently involved in the early season Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah, like I remember writing Jaylen Naylor's prospect profile in the guide 2 years ago or last year, whatever it was, and I'm thinking, like, I can't believe that like there could be relevancy to some degree with his name, because he just was such a mediocre prospect.
Yeah.
Too bad Tyler Boyd signed already.
Yeah. I was gonna say, like, this is a prime
still around.
Is Jarvis Landry a coach? Is Jarvis Landry available?
Probably.
I think Jarvis Landry is a coach.
Michael Thomas.
Michael Thomas is a Viking. Sign it up.
Yeah.
Michael Thomas is a Viking. True. Yeah.
Let's move on here to
picks, so I'm into it.
Yeah. A couple risers and fallers here, which was the original premise of the show. I'm not really sure if it still is, but yeah, the lack of news has really killed that premise. But anyways, this is over the past 2 weeks. A couple guys I wanted to hit on here while we have JJ before we get into his exposures. Pacheco is a guy who's pretty steadily climbed. In terms of raw ADP, it's not a huge jump, but in terms of percentage, he is the highest riser over the past 2 weeks, all the way up to pick 43, kind of approaching the 3-4 turn now. Curious, JJ, there's been a lot of different takes on Pacheco, especially in regards to sort of the structure of this year's draft layout. What are your thoughts on Pacheco as a best ball pick on Underdog?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think where he's going now, and obviously we've all like felt it and seen it. I think where he's going now, it sort of just reflects like what's going on in that part of the draft where, in that early fourth, it's kind of like, if you're not going to get quarterback, or if you're like, you feel like you're reaching a tight end for some of these guys, like if it's like if the top two are gone, And then the wide receivers often are like, I don't know. Like I don't know if I need to force it here. So I think it's just like part of the reason why that's happening. Well, one of the reasons I think the ETR guys are high on Pacheco, and that's probably part of the reason that he's rising, but also I think it's just where he's going in the draft. Now, do I agree? I mean, I think it's fair. Yeah. Like I don't see a massive difference in like why we would love Travis Etienne more than Isiah Pacheco, realistically. I mean, there's some like market related trends that I studied for the draft guide this year that definitely paints somewhat of an unfavorable picture for Pacheco. One of those trends being that like poorer prospect scores coming out, even if they're past their rookie season and for being drafted as RB1s, those guys don't pan out at as high of a rate as the alternatives do. I think that just kind of plays into like the fragility of those kinds of players, right? But I think that if you look at it case by case, I think that applies more. Davis, cover your ears. I think it applies more to like a Kyron Williams than it does to Isiah Pacheco, because we've now seen multiple off seasons with the Chiefs where they haven't really done that much to throw in the backfield with Pacheco, right? Like they're showing us in a lot of ways that that's just their dude, right? And so I think there's a lot of reason to be bullish on him this year and be cool with him where he's going.
He's flipped ETN in ADP now.
He should.
I think he should.
We have no structural concerns about the offense that he's in. In fact, the market kind of day by day is telling us they expect the Chiefs to score more and more points. And each day it's like this is like the Lindy effect. Each day that continues where veteran running back X is not added to the roster, and it's going to be Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Pacheco, and whichever one of the UDFAs ends up making it as the third, makes it more likely that Pacheco, Pat, to your legendary upside thing, to get to that 4 reception threshold. I mean, I would still take the under on that, but it could happen. I think probably Worthy and Hollywood are most likely to get that stuff, or whatever role Tony has on the team. One of Tony or Hardman is making the team, and they will do a lot of that short area, cheat motion, the crap that Andy Reid falls in love with. That is like on a normal team, that's the running back stuff. And on the Chiefs, it goes to these bit player wide receivers.
Yeah, I mean, my argument against Pacheco in some ways would be, I don't, as far as like the legendary upside stuff goes, he's not a strong candidate.
No, he's not.
Right.
You're kind of like, you're betting on him being like a low end RB1, but like the legendary upside concept is about round 1 and 2. If you're taking him in round 4, it's like, all you get is a low end RB1. Like we saw that work very well last year with ETN. He was a hit last year in round 4. Wasn't the biggest hit you could have had, but he was a good pick. You don't need the dude to be the ultra legendary running back in round 4. And that's helpful. You don't need that, because that's
he could
really hard to find.
He could score 21 touchdowns, like that. That's his path to legendary upside. It's just completely sun running. He goes what's the best 5-yard line conversion season a running back's ever had? Like if he has some insane conversion inside the 5 or something.
Yeah, you just got to hope that they're not as pass heavy as they typically are.
Well, they definitely will be. They definitely will be. Yeah, Paul V said it right in the chat, I think, which is that Pacheco's got very little legendary downside. Like this is not a Clyde Edwards-Helaire might be the starter in week 1 situation at all. Yeah,
that's true. He's not getting passed. He's locked in. You got the injury risk with all running backs, but other than that, like he's super locked in. And I do think there is upside with, like, does he have contingent value in a sense of like if CEH is out, does he get?
I don't know.
17, he got.
This is a team that plays like Derek Gore, and like I think that's galaxy braining it a bit. I mean, maybe he could get to 80% of the snaps or something in those spots.
Yeah, I think he could.
Yeah.
Honestly, I feel like with Pacheco's upside, you need the Chiefs to stop doing all the bullshit plays at the goal line where they, throw a toss to Kelsey.
Find a new slant, buddy. I promise you, it's not happening.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Is that's unlikely to happen. So I think that's like the biggest problem with Pacheco is, even though like zooming way out, you would think he has really high TD upside. I think it's a little bit lower than it seems just because
it would all be, it would literally be an accident. I mean this seriously. It would literally, like if he scored 20 touchdowns, it would literally be like an accident, effectively.
I don't love that. Yeah, I don't want accident to be.
Yeah, bonsai bets. Get ready to learn Louis Reese Zamet at the goal line. Yeah, like you think Andy Reid is not just like salivating at running a literal rugby play from the 3-yard line? Like this is what gets Andy Reid. He's won 3 Super Bowls in the last 5 years. This is why he still wants to coach, so that he can do this stuff.
Yeah, it's not even about running the most efficient play at the goal line. It's just about having fun. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, when you're Andy Reid and you can just do that and it still works.
They did a ring around the rosy play in a playoff game, dude. It's like the degrees to which he will be unserious. No one can comprehend it.
Yeah, I do. So CH missed that Week 17 game last year, and that's the game where he had 93% snap share. Pacheco did.
Yeah.
He also missed Week 9. Pacheco was at 68%. My issue with Pacheco is that like much of last year, he was kind of floating between like 50 and 60% of the snaps.
Not down the stretch though, right? Like once McKinnon went out, I think he was pretty solidly at like 70 plus.
Yeah, he was.
Well, yeah, he was getting a lot of the 2-minute stuff with them, which was obviously unlocking him.
Right. Although he only had 57% Week 16, and that was a decent.
You guys want to hear a scary story though? Samaj P. Ryan.
Yeah, I mean that's a scary story for like half of the NFL's backfields right now.
I mean, it would be very bad for Pacheco though, because I think he would get like none of it. But I mean, I wake up in a cold sweat at night thinking about P. Ryan going back to the Bengals. That is like,
which is probably the most likely outcome.
Yeah, that seems like the most likely one.
Better Chase Brown would be like the appropriate running back 52 in that scenario. So I need to start baking that in.
But I'm with Ben Gretsch on the Pacheco stuff of like, I don't care so much about his price. I want to know that I can get a 7th round receiver. Like in that, wherever he's going, can I definitely get a receiver I like in the 7th round? And if so, like, I don't mind taking him in the 4th. The early 4th would be just as fine as the late 4th. Because in the late 4th right now, I know I can get a 7th round receiver, and so I'm willing to take him there.
Right.
Well, if you want to make sure you can get a 7th round receiver, just draft on DraftKings, and Rome Odunze will be sitting there in the 7th every single time for you. So
correct.
Be no problem there. Let's move on to talking about the Patriots risers here. I know we obviously with Crane on the show, we have to talk about the Patriots every show. It's literally in my contract that I have to bring it up.
Your contract.
Yeah, it's both of our contracts. I'm not sure who's paying us, but I'm sure the money's coming in soon. JJ, curious what your stance is on specifically Polk. I think he's the most exciting one of this group. Maybe something that stood out to you in his prospect profile. Anything that excites you as a breakout candidate for Jaylen Polk?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting that his best ball / potentially season long, but you know, if you look at like season long rankings right now, it's like wild how low rookies are and such. Like Jaylen Polk I just did
this exercise today, pulling in ADPs from Sleeper and ESPN and Fantrax, and it was like, I think Demario Douglas maybe just is not getting drafted on some, like it was hilarious how low they are comparatively.
Douglas, I mean, should we be drafting him in redraft? You know, like he's
that's fair. It's a fair point. I mean, like there's no reason to like be aggressive for a guy who we're just But yeah, no, Polk was. I only bring that up because in like rookie drafts and stuff, and in the dynasty community, because you asked about his prospect stuff, I feel like people were just not very interested in Polk as a prospect. He had fine enough marks. My model gave him weight to the fact that Jalen McMillan and Rome Odunze played with him, and that definitely boosted his score a little bit. He was basically scored around like what his draft capital said. Like he wasn't like a spectacular prospect, but he wasn't a bad prospect by any means. Had some interesting comps. I think he's a good perimeter receiver, and he has that upside to be kind of that dude, right? And that's why I think he's the most attractive by far in any fantasy format in 2024. But yeah, I mean, like their costs rising. It's been like this, I feel like we've seen this pretty consistently over the last like 2 months, like right after the draft, you could get a lot, like even Douglas has been rising post draft and such. I was buying into them before. I'm not like aggressively going after them now. I mean, there's a lot of data that suggests that receivers with rookie quarterbacks generally aren't going to give you like league winning upside. And I do think, I'm more of the belief that we're going to see more Drake May than less Drake May, versus what the market generally thinks, just because we usually see more.
I knew we invited you on for a reason.
We usually see more rookie quarter. We would see it more often. Like we always think a certain way in June, and I understand the logic behind it. I just am never. I just don't want to buy into that too heavily. And so yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of ambiguity with the rookie stuff. But at cost, I feel like I don't know about you guys, but like at cost with Polk, I haven't gotten him nearly as much as I was a month ago.
No, he was like free before. I still get him sometimes, but a lot of the time where I was getting him before, it would be like I would be trying to set, like I ran out of options and I need to set up my backdoor. Now when I need to set up the backdoor stack, it's Baker. You do like round 16 Baker, round 17 May. Polk you have to like plan for now.
Right.
Polk
Which
still comes. He still comes preloaded on my roster most of the time.
Me too.
I haven't figured a way to change that setting yet, but yeah, he's
I think
usually
he's good.
there.
You're buying into the right talent, I think. I mean, like I was higher on him than a lot of the other dynasty analysts and such. But yeah,
you're higher on them than I was. But I'm drafting. I can't stop drafting them.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess it's just some of my team builds and such, and like some of the running backs going around that range, I'm still interested in because he's currently. Is he going in that rookie running back cluster or around there?
Yeah.
He's 134. Yeah, he's going alongside like the Marshawn Lloyds of the
Right.
world.
And that's the hardest part for me is that just given team builds and the way the structure looks.
Yeah, I always need a running back there.
I always am in a place where I'm like, yeah, I'm getting Marshawn Lloyd here because I'm high on a lot of those guys too, so it just evens out my exposure.
Yeah. So one reason I've been in on Polk and JJ, I think this actually goes back to research you did a while ago, but I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think you did some study that showed when you're targeting wide receivers in sort of around this range, it's best to go for the guys who are going as wide receiver 1 on their team by ADP, as opposed to getting sort of the wide receiver 3 maybe on a good team. So last year, if you think about it, I used that sort of tiebreaker a lot of the time. That's how sort of Nico Collins was one guy I looked at that fit that criteria. Even Adam Thielen, not a guy I drafted a bunch, but you could also say he fit that criteria, and at cost, he was certainly a good pick. Do you think there's anything to that? Just the fact that the wide receiver room is obviously really ambiguous there, and say relative to guys going around him, Gabe Davis, Josh Downs, Jahan Dotson, he has a much better chance of being an alpha target earner on that team.
Yeah, I don't know if I had the trend in the guide this year because I used a little bit different data and just kind of formatted things a little bit differently. Instead of looking at rounds, I looked at like positional groupings just so that you can translate the data and the information to any league that you're drafting in, as opposed to like, the running back dead zone is in round 3 to round 6, but like dead zone running backs themselves are, their traits that they share. There are things that they're alike. And so what the big thing with like late round wide receivers is this is from a season long perspective, because that's what I was studying for the guide and stuff. And you brought it up, but is you do want to get rookies. Like if you can get a rookie who had a decent prospect score, I started layering my prospect model into my redraft and season long analysis this year. If you can get a rookie with a good prospect score, now good would be above like 90 and he was at like 86. So he wasn't quite there, but in the 80s is still a pretty good score. That's definitely good. Like that's the reason why, again, like if you look at like a Fantasy Pros rankings or something, like he's like probably wide receiver 80 or something insane. Just like, so like you're going to have him in every like home league imaginable this year. Right. But I do think, obviously underdog drafters are sharp and he's rising for a reason. And I think that he's finally risen to a point where the opportunity cost is significant enough for me to not just auto click him in every draft.
Yeah. I'm not auto clicking him. And I am obviously trying to set up Drake May stacks. Partly that's why I'm taking a lot of Polk, but there's a lot of times where if I have a week 14 quarterback, I'll also kind of break ties away because I'm like, I can't do the May thing as much. But I don't. One thing that I feel like I've especially coming from Dynasty, right? Like you get there's like the guys who come in. I was too low on Olave, for example, and Polk not the level of prospect that Olave was, but they're like, you get this thing where you're like, yeah, like he'll be good, but like, will he be great?
Right.
And I think
which matters so much less in redraft because you just want him to get on the field.
If a guy is good in redraft, is a rookie, it's a smash. Like that's a smash. So I'm still not like super hyped about Polk from Dynasty, and in some ways I'm like still disappointed they took Polk as opposed to like one of the really high upside guys they could have taken, because I want May to be paired with someone really exciting, right?
Yeah, they should have taken AD Mitchell, but
that would have been very fun.
But my issue is that I thought that like a lot of the wide receivers in this year's draft, like who went in the second round, are all they all just have like massive red flags, like across the board. Like even AD Mitchell, right? Like
for sure he did. Yeah.
Yeah. You can be excited about Mitchell, but like you're logical to know that like there's tons of red flags.
There's a lot of red flags.
Well, it's the new meta. You know, NFL teams are drafting like underdog piss boys, like the white. There's like very like a guy, Lad McConkey, 5 years.
We
ago,
know ball.
Not going in the first round, not even going close, like probably a third round pick, like 5 years ago or whatever. But the thirst and the need for wide receivers amongst NFL teams means there's going to be a lot of guys with real red flags who have serious draft capital.
I think Polk doesn't have he's got some red flags, but he's not littered with red flags.
No, but the thing that's hard. So my low key, actually not very low key because I said it on a bunch of podcasts, but like I kind of equated the Washington wide receiver group to the USC wide receiver group from like a handful of years ago, where Polk is kind of like they're like you have Drake London as Roma Dunze, you have Jalen McMillan as ARSB, which I actually thought was a comp for him. Like in my model, it was kind of like a deeper comp, like actually it's a top 3 comp for him. But and then Michael Pittman would be the Jalen Polk of the group. Like to that point, I don't think he's like a Pittman clone. I'm just saying that like that could be the outcome that we're looking at with these wide receivers. And if we're not adjusting for competition, like teammate competition and that's, and like, you know, the team itself, I think we're doing ourselves a disservice because it does matter, right? Like these guys were all drafted on with day 1 or day 2 picks. And like, we look at his like Polk's numbers and we're like, I mean, his top comps, I'm looking at my guide right now, my prospect guide, was like Deshaun Hamilton, Des Fitzpatrick, and Paris Campbell was one. Like
Deshaun Hamilton kind of had a nice little run before it turned out he stunk.
He had a run within Dynasty analysts, just all this hopium.
He had a run in your rankings.
There was no actual run.
He had like 3.5 good games for the 2020 Denver Broncos.
Yeah, he had a run on keep trade cut for a little while.
Right. But like the bottom line though is that like those guys, this is all statistical and it's not layering on. Like what boosts Jalen Polk's prospect score in the model is that he played with these other like really solid pros, right? Like statistically, you're right. Like it's like, man, there's not much like to get super hyped about with Polk, but then you're like, okay, well, there's at least something out there that like can't be measured very easily, and that's the fact that he played with these really good wide receivers. So what if he's just kind of special and we're just not going to see it in the spreadsheets?
Yeah, and I think the other thing with best ball is you always kind of be thinking like, what if, you know, what is the bar that I'm kind of needing to clear at this price?
Right.
In this situation and at this price, and I still think at the current price, if he's 80% Michael Pittman, like, oh, yeah. And I don't like Michael Pittman at all. But like, if he's honestly 80% Michael Pittman, like what a smash. And I think that's true for like a little bit longer. I think he would have to get into like the 120s or even into like the high, like if he was like 118, then I'd be like, okay, that is enough opportunity cost where he's not someone I'm really prioritizing at all. But
yeah. And it can, like that type of bet can fail. And this is not to disparage Polk at all, because I love him, but like it's very similar to the Jonathan Mingo bet last year in certain ways, right? Like rookie quarterback, guy that's pretty locked into getting routes, high draft capital, but you know, Mingo's prospect profile was way spottier than Polk. So
and more boom bust, I would say.
Yeah,
Mingo was like
exactly.
a bet on. It's like if his athleticism translates, like, oh man, he could be pretty fun, and then it didn't. But Polk's like he's I don't want to say like a true like technician or anything, but he's like the idea is that he's like a professional wide receiver out of the box.
Yeah. And exactly. And even with the Mingo thing, like that obviously went horrible, but you were still getting like 90% route rates in the playoffs. Now he didn't do anything, right? But like he was a live player in your lineup in the playoffs, and that was the worst case scenario, right?
In fantasy football playoffs.
He did give us an incredible meme.
Mingo
you should be thankful for that.
Like Mingo had way more red flags than Jaylen Polk in my opinion.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, Mingo was literally just like big, fast second round. That was the
he's
whole
it's almost like another wide receiver they
drafted. Is there anyone else like that?
Anytime I ran a sim score for Leggett the other day, like on stream, just to prove to people that he's this bad pick. And like it's never endingly funny that Mingo is his top sim score in like anything. It's so funny.
Yeah. And the funniest part about the Panthers is that they did this with Terrace Marshall too, and we just don't even remember him anymore.
Marshall is on the sim scores for Leggett if you look it up.
I think Marshall's a better prospect than all of them.
I agree.
Like
he was the
legit.
best prospect.
It's just hilarious that like it's literally back-to-back years where they're doing this with these. I mean, like, you know, there's obviously a high variance game with a player like Leggett or like a player with like Mingo, where I don't think it should shock anyone if like Leggett's decent or like is like goes the DK Metcalf route to some degree, maybe not to the 100% Metcalf, but like that's sort of like the upper range. But yeah, I mean, objectively, he's a very scary prospect.
Yeah. I still like Leggett, but maybe that's a separate conversation. The last thing I wanted to get to here is, you know, this is a show that grinds out the most micro of micro edges. Do you guys ever think about, like, if you tack on Jaylen Polk to your roster, do you think of the correlation of him and Jalen McMillan? Like, if Polk is good, McMillan is likely good too.
I think there's real.
I thought you were going to go so gross there, and that's just fun. I like that a lot.
Yeah, I'm doing that with Adunze and them too. Like, it's the tiniest of tiebreakers, but it's like it kind of makes sense. And obviously, this has never failed. Like, JSN was guaranteed to be good after those other two guys were good, so there's no way this can fail.
Micah Bernard has a big part of that story to tell of the JSN story.
Terrace Marshall, by the way, I mean he's one of these you would expect him to be correlated. Like Chase and Jefferson are awesome. He produced with them. Surely
Chase Jefferson and Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Terrace Marshall was like better than them before he broke his foot at LSU. Like,
what happened?
I know, it's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah,
Panthers.
But anyways, I do think
Panthers.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah, the Panthers. One faller here. 40 minutes in, we're not to JJ's exposures yet, but we'll get there, guys. I did want to talk about the Barkley thing. Here's why I bring this up, and this can be a shorter debate, but like, I feel like for me, Barkley was easy to rule out when he opened up at ADP of like 14 and 15 to the point where just like I wasn't thinking about him much at all. And now that he's at like 21, I feel like maybe a leak for me in past years is like I rule a guy out at an egregiously high ADP. I stop paying attention to him. Yeah. He keeps creeping backwards and I still just stop paying attention to him. Like at some point, obviously the Barkley bet is good. So I kind of want to have like, I don't know, a foot in the sand there, whatever the expression is of when it's a good bet.
That's
starting with you, JJ. Yeah. Starting with you, JJ. Curious what your thoughts are on Barkley, now at 21 ADP, close to sort of the 2-3 turn now.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you. I get him at the 2-3 turn frequently, especially it's really easy to click his name too when you're getting Lamb, right? To just get that week 17 correlation. But I'm of the belief, like I'm probably going to end up, I think right now my exposure to him is probably like 5-ish%, and I might end up in the 6 to 7 with Barkley. And the main reason for that, I know that it's like I know that that's a pretty cheap answer because it's basically around market, but like I see an outcome where the Eagles don't operate identically to how they've operated the last couple of years. And I also think that we need to, even though we might not see a huge difference from like a value standpoint and what the numbers say with different running backs and stuff in backfields, I do think that it could be a philosophical change to some degree as well, because they did go out and he's by far the most talented running back that they've had. Sorry to DeAndre Swift truthers that they've had, over the last handful of years with Jalen Hurts. So I think that, there's also the Jason Kelce effect. What if they don't do the tush push as much? There's the offensive coordinator change. Like, there are so many moving pieces and changing parts within this offense that I don't think that we should feel so confident that they're going to just operate the same way. I think that it's fine to have that be sort of a baseline, but then kind of react from there. And I think the reaction is yeah, early second round, not going to do it. Late second round, I'm fine with that.
At the end of the day, I am ideologically drafting and ranking Devin Achane ahead of Saquon Barkley because that's how I believe the game should be played. I think you should focus on guys like Achane in best ball. But at the end of the year, am I going to be surprised if that goes against me? Like if I look back and be like, what was one big error you made? And I was like, oh, I took a 208-pound guy who keeps getting injured over Saquon Barkley 900 times in one offseason. Yeah, probably that could go bad. I think the point where, like, I've taken him in the third round several times because he's a good value proposition. Like Michael Pittman or Steph Diggs or DK Metcalf or Barkley. Like Barkley's probably the better pick, but it comes back. It's really the Kyron Williams thing. It's the legendary downside. Like he could have a 7-touchdown season, which is just not good for what he costs now. So I think it's approaching appropriate, but he's going to be on the riser when we do this in a month, because in August, when the normies are drafting more, he's going to go back up.
For me, it's also the Achane thing. I just want to be really, really overweight Achane this year. I'm willing as well to kind of do the thing where I take him in the late second and go, I've got a receiver in round 1. I'm going to get a receiver in round 3. And, I'll let the market decide a little bit who that receiver is, as opposed to taking a receiver and then hoping I get Achane. Right. I kind of was started there. I tried to push Achane to the third for a while. I wasn't getting as much as I wanted. And now I'm kind of back to taking him in the second more. I'm not willing to do that with Barkley. I'd rather just pick my receiver. But if he falls to the third, I'm pretty much, as long as I've got 2 wide receivers to start, I'm trying to take him when he's there in the third, because I just don't have, I'm at like 1%. So I don't really, otherwise I just won't have any. And I agree, Davis. Like if Barkley beats me, I'm not going to be like shocked.
Right.
It's just that, like Achane to me is just, he's like kind of big flashing lights, like target. And I want to be really overweight, and that's going to be at the expense of some other players. And kind of the most obvious would be another running back in that range who I like less.
Are you guys as low on Jonathan Taylor as Saquon?
No, I think Taylor's rushing touchdown upside is so much greater because they won't. I think they're so much less likely to do the push.
Oh, I see that opposite actually. I think Barkley's like 20 touchdown seasons are way more frequent than Taylor's.
I also think Taylor's better than Barkley at this point. So like maybe that's the mental discrepancy. Like I just think Taylor's like a great running back, and Barkley's always kind of had the same concerns of the success rate is a little bit lower than you'd think. And I'm also the Steichen thing. I mean, Steichen offenses, I think they're just gonna.
Also, his receiving efficiency has not been really good since his rookie season, and that's another thing where like, oh, he's gonna. They just had DeAndre Swift, and he didn't get used as a receiver, so they're going to use Barkley a bunch as a receiver. I just don't buy it. So it comes to the touchdown stuff, and then the talent. And I'm kind of where you're at on Barkley, JJ, is kind of where I'm at on Taylor.
Yeah, I got you.
Like 6%. I'd mix him in. I will have like a small fade position on him likely, but I think in this offense with Richardson, potentially opening up rushing lanes, like if he gets back to his form a couple years ago, he could be a smash.
Yeah, I mean, for the record, I'm on Team Achane too in that area, especially after talking to you, Pat, on becoming a best ball bro, because we talked about it a little bit. But like it's to me, I don't necessarily see a massive gap between Taylor and Saquon, and if I'm getting the more of a cost benefit on Saquon right now. Like you said, I think he'll probably rise over the next month just naturally as we get, more casual drafters in there. But I just don't see a big enough difference just because there are so many. I think Jonathan Taylor's projection is safer, right? Because we have a general idea of the Steichen offense. We saw it a little bit with Anthony Richardson. I just think there's a lot. I think it just comes down to I see a little bit more variability in what the Eagles offense might do this year.
Yeah, I do think that point is interesting because I think it's funny sometimes how the market interprets like coordinator changes. Like, for example, with the Chargers, Greg Roman's going to the Chargers. So the market's saying, all right, they're going to be a run-first offense now. Like Justin Herbert being the all-time leader in pass attempts per game, that doesn't matter. The coordinator is what matters. Now the Eagles have a new coordinator in Kellen Moore, who heavily featured running backs, in the passing game with Austin Eckler. Even the Cowboys guys farther back in his history, and not the market, but I think what we're saying is no, that doesn't matter. It's the DeAndre Swift tendencies from last year that matter. It's the Miles Sanders tendencies that matter. And I think there's just a chance. Again, I'm not huge on Barkley, so I'm not advocating for some overweight position on him. But when you give a guy like $26 million guaranteed, there's a chance that's like an offense changing player, like a guy that you're going to redesign how running back is used in the offense around. And yeah, just to DJ's point, with a new offensive coordinator, like I think there's enough new variables there that I'm open to the upside case of Saquon Barkley. And again, the last thing I'll say is like the rushing receiving efficiency stats on a Daniel Jones offense. I'm just like not buying those mattering that much.
Yeah.
It's fair.
But they matter for every other player usually. And like I get it. It's Daniel Jones, terrible situation. But like, what's he, like a 6th year back now? Right? Like this is not a young player for a running back.
Yeah.
Sure.
And so we're like, no, he's going to find the fountain of youth.
Certainly riskier, yeah.
New offense is going to be used as a receiver when they haven't used receivers. It's like they have Jalen Hurts. It's not, Kellen Moore may call more passing plays to the running back. I think that's plausible, but it's still Jalen Hurts. Like that's not really his game. So, yeah, but I do agree with you, JJ, that like the gap between him and Taylor isn't that wide. It's like Taylor, I just am more willing to kind of get on board with, and then I'm probably too ideologically opposed to.
That's where I'm at, Crane. Is I'm just like kind of like ideologically opposed to Barkley because of where he was going 2 months ago, and it's like I should start to change.
But I should probably mix him in sometimes over Devonta Smith or something.
Yeah. Here's the last thing I'll say is like, I think it's very likely once casuals come in, if you're comparing Achane to Barkley, that Achane slides down and Barkley goes up. Like that's not. I wouldn't bet all my money on that.
I agree with that.
Yeah, so I think like now, if you're gonna mix in some Barkley over Achane, like if you want your 4% exposure blanket to Barkley, like I think now is the time. Yeah. Because he's only getting more expensive, and
I'm going 1% towel on Barkley, but I just want to make sure. I want to make sure I'm not at 0% by the end with a big price rise.
Yeah. All right. So no more fallers here really to discuss. Let's get into the meat of the show. JJ's highest exposure.
47 minutes into the show, getting into the
exactly.
meat.
Yeah. So we'll start here with quarterbacks. This is JJ's brand. So we're going through his highest exposure players at each position. One of the guys that is your highest exposure player is Derek Carr of the Saints. Obviously, JJ, really exciting player to talk about. So you have the floor.
No, I mean, look, my quarterback exposure, and Sam saw it. It's insanely flat. I mean, this is not like a very strong stance on Carr. This is more so, I'm going to go with a 3 quarterback build here. I'm drafting Rashid Shaheed a lot, so I guess Derek Carr is going to be the quarterback of this team. But I actually like the quarterbacks we're going to talk about. Each of them kind of share one thing in common, and that's offensive coordinator changes and shifts in coaching. And with the Saints, I feel like not enough people are talking about Clint Kubiak going there, being their coordinator. I think that there was some talk about like Spencer Rattler potentially taking Derek Carr's job and such. I'm not like overly concerned about that, just given the fact that we don't see that happen very frequently, with day 3 kind of players. Maybe it happens late in the season, but it's not like the NFC South / the NFC is like overly competitive. And then, with Clint Kubiak, he was a passing game coordinator in San Francisco. He's coming over after Brock Purdy had an almost MVP season last year. He's going to get players in motion a whole lot, make it a little bit easier on the quarterback. I'm not selling Derek Carr as someone who's going to like light the world on fire. It's more so, again, it's a 3 quarterback build thing. Sometimes I'll even get him, if I get an elite quarterback, he'll be my QB too. But it's more so just the stance on I think that he can outplay his ADP just based on that coordinator shift and what he's got around him.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing with Carr, because I keep, I was like, you can see the bottom falling out on this offense pretty easily. And so it's like, okay, and maybe they want to move on from Carr and they see what they have in Rattler. Like that narrative's pretty easy to start creating in your head. But Daniel Raz, who helps with the leg up rankings, has been all over the contract here, which is they cannot get out of this contract next year. He's got a $50 million dead cap hit. $10 million roster bonus has already been guaranteed. The 2025 salary is fully guaranteed for injury already, and then $30 million of it guarantees the third day of the league year next year. So they would have to, basically be willing to eat this huge cap hit to avoid another $30 million of the salary guaranteeing. So the scenario in which Derek Carr is benched at the end of the year is a 2025 scenario, because they could plausibly get out of the deal after 2025. They'd save like $30 million by cutting him. I think he's kind of, even though the Saints might not be very good at all, he's like a pretty safe bet. He throws for a lot of yards. They who to play it with, through, especially with
it's 10 dome games, 11 dome games.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think he's a good pick.
Yeah.
And I think it can't be. Go ahead, Davis.
It doesn't matter. Well, it just doesn't matter that he stinks. I mean, this is this is a very clear example of people being unable to delineate the difference between real football and fantasy football. Like, sure, you're never winning a Super Bowl with Derek Carr. It just, doesn't happen. But he is completely fine for In fact, he's been much better than fine for fantasy football. He's got two pretty strong wide receivers to throw to, and that's what I like about Carr now is you do the round 9 Shaheed. You set it up. You got your quarterback optionality. If you're really in jail, you can do Carr, Juwan in the last 2 rounds. It's pretty nice.
Yeah, and I don't think it can be understated. Like, even if Clint Kubiak is just a middle of the road offensive coordinator, what Pete Carmichael was doing last year in New Orleans, I've been digging into a lot of the pre-snap motion, cheat motion stuff. The Saints are always dead last in terms of teams that were using those concepts last year. And I really do think that is a signal of offensive creativity, being able to scheme your players open for gimme targets that keep the offense moving. Yeah. On the other end of the spectrum, it's Mike McDaniel and Kyle Shanahan that are always leading the league in that. So
yeah, also, I just think you're not doing that, which is such an easy thing to see working. What else aren't you doing? You're clearly stuck in your ways,
Yeah, Pete Carmichael on the Broncos coaching staff now, so I'm sure that's gonna go great. So number 2 here, sticking with the late round quarterback theme, Geno Smith. What's the rationale for him being one of your highest exposure players, JJ?
Yeah, look, I mean, there's obvious risk with him potentially losing the gig or something towards the end of the year, but I see this as another coordinator shift that should be favorable. Seattle's actually been 6th and 12th in overall pass rate over the last 2 seasons, but they've been so efficient offensively that they just don't run many plays. They're also not the fastest team, so they haven't run that many plays. 2 years ago, we saw it with Geno. He had a good season. He was scoring 18 fantasy points per game. He was giving us enough spiked weeks. He likely wasn't even being drafted often, but, off the waiver wire, et cetera, in season-long formats. Last year, he really disappointed. The big difference last year was that on 15-plus air yard throws, he only had 4 touchdown passes, when 2 years ago, that number was 14. And so you switch offensive coordinators, you get Ryan Grubb. I don't think they're going to be Washington pass heavy, like some people have argued, Ryan Grubb being the offensive coordinator for the Huskies last year. Because obviously personnel is dictating that. They had the 3 wide receivers we were talking about earlier. They had Michael Penix. They're going to throw the ball around the field.
Awesome offensive line.
Yeah, right. Why would they not throw the ball around the field? My thing, though, is I think they're going to play with a little bit more pace, a little bit more tempo. And they've talked about already throwing the ball deep more, which is what we need out of this offense, not just for JSN's sake, but for Geno. Like I said, 2 years ago, part of the reason he was so good from a fantasy perspective, at least versus cost, was because he was able to connect on those deep balls. And I think that they'll be able to do that better and more frequently with the coordinator change. So again, this is just a stacking thing too. It's just really how I'm. This is just picking up
a $5 bill that you saw on the street. It's no one's that jazzed about it. But yeah, Geno is going to provide. He's going to add points to the average best ball roster that he is on.
So I had to fight through kind of a weird bias. You guys remember that impression of Evan Silva that went around last year? And the impression was Evan talking up the Seattle passing game. That video was so funny that I actually think I probably overdrafted Geno last year. And then I had to be like, God, that was pretty dumb, huh? And then it took me a minute to kind of come back around to Geno this year, but I am also in on Geno here. He's just, I mean, again, like this year, I would say in general, this year's late round quarterback seems so much stronger because the job security is there. Like Geno's going to start all year.
Yeah, I would hope so at least. I mean, here's the other thing. There's so much. So the way that fantasy gamers draft now, they understand the importance of mobility. There's not mobile quarterbacks late in drafts. Did we just lose Sam? There
Well, it depends.
mobile...
Bo Nix could be. You could call Mr. Nix a little mobile,
or Drake May. I think
Drake May is a little
yeah.
mobile.
But I mean from the standpoint of like guys that we're projecting to be like really relevant in fantasy, being mobile, right? We're not getting them late. Like it's Jaden Daniels, and then there's a wall for the most part, right?
Yeah.
And so, and Jaden Daniels, sure, in your home league, he's going to go QB 17, but on underdog, he's not. And so there's so much volatility to passing numbers and pocket passer numbers that no one should be shocked if Geno Smith outscores maybe Brock Purdy's a bad example, or like Tua or something like that, right? We're like the difference between those guys from a projection standpoint is not nearly as significant as people think in their minds. And honestly, it's a lot easier to stack him because he's just going so much later. But like the variance that you get with passing numbers is just so great that I'm willing to just get the pocket passers later as opposed to spending up to get them, unless, I'm just forcing it a little bit with a stack.
Yeah. You also do have Noah Fant you can tack on to the Geno stack.
Yep.
And the Bears, I like drafting the Bears receivers, not DJ Moore quite as much, but I'm drafting Keenan, I'm drafting Adunze, and I will mix in more. And so you get the opposite side of that game. So easy one to say.
Yep. Sorry, I lagged out there for a sec. But last thing I wanted to say, I think I agree generally on all the pro Geno stuff. I do think last year what really hurt the Seahawks and the reason Geno's stats took a big dive was the offensive line. That was ranked as one of the worst offensive lines in the league. And again, this year, that's a bit of a red flag for me in Seattle's offense. Like if something holds them back, it's probably going to be the offensive line again. So that's stopped me from being overly excited about them, but I still think Geno is a great pick there. So let's get to a third of your highest exposure quarterbacks, JJ. Will Levis, the Mayo King himself.
Yeah.
What's going on here?
He's number one for me right now. And it's partially, I just love drafting the offense. Like I think Tennessee's offense is just underpriced right now based on Brian Callahan move. They're going to run not only a lot more 11 personnel, but they're going to throw the ball a lot more. Callahan has, we have experience of Callahan without Joe Burrow, and they're still a pass heavy offense. That's not just when Joe Burrow's been hurt, but before Joe Burrow even got there, Callahan was offensive coordinator for a year, and they were still pretty pass heavy. And so
that's right.
I think that Tennessee is going to be more pass heavy. They've done every move that they've made this offseason has shown us that. Not only did they get Calvin Ridley, but they add Tony Pollard, who is not like if you were to pair someone with Tajay Spears, Tony Pollard is more of a duplicate of Spears as opposed to someone who's like a good tandem partner, which in my opinion, teams should be doing that more frequently and getting like players who are alike so that you don't know if they're going to be throwing the ball or running the ball on a certain down. But yeah, I mean, like everything that points to this Tennessee offense throwing the ball more, and Will Levis last year, if nothing else, showed us that he's aggressive AF. I mean, the dude, his 20 plus air yard throw rate was like 8 percentage points higher than the number 2 quarterback, which was Jordan Love in the league, according to PFF. So this is also the other reason I like Tennessee is because I really like that Jacksonville Tennessee game too. Like, but I think both those offenses are just a little bit underpriced, and it's fun to get pieces to them. And you have the ability to get pieces to them throughout your draft. And so naturally, if I start stacking them, it's just really easy. It's like, oh, I drafted Brian Thomas, then I'm going to, I guess, and then I drafted DeAndre Hopkins and Brian Thomas at like the 6-7 turn. So sure, I'll get Will Levis late and have a little stack there. So Levis right now is my highest rostered and highest exposed quarterback. But again, it's not like in the 20% range just because I'm not getting that high with any of these quarterbacks.
I love this one. I mean, I think it's like Tennessee just very clear is what they want to do. He's cheap. He did not run really at all last year, but theoretically, I mean, he was like the Wildcat quarterback when he was at Penn State. He's big. He's not that fast, but if he is any good at all, if Will Levis can be replacement level NFL quarterback, they're going to let him throw it 580 times and run 60 times or whatever. Like the whole roster is, the archetype now is spread personnel, push the ball down the field. Like it's good for fantasy.
Yeah, I like Levis too. I mean, another guy who's like, he's starting all year. They're going to see what they have. And I mean, all of these guys, if they're absolutely horrible, they won't start all year. But you lose when they're absolutely horrible, so that doesn't really matter. What I hate is like, this guy might be pretty good, and then he gets benched because they want to check out a rookie or whatever. But he's the young player they're looking to check out. So you get the safety, you get the upside. We don't know how good he is yet. We get them definitely passing a lot more. I like Hopkins a lot. I think he's a really strong pick. So, and I'm in this game as well because I like Kirk has gotten more expensive, but he used to be a pretty big target for me. But I take Brian Thomas, so I'm also in this game a decent amount. And then, a little guilty pleasure for the 18th round. You can don't tell anyone about it, but you can take Traylon Burks if you get real into this.
No,
just a little guilty pleasure.
I don't know, man.
Immediate veto.
Yeah, we'll have the
see. This is don't tell anyone. This is what they'll say. But...
Keelan Robinson is a better correlated pick to Will Levis than Traylon Burks.
What about those bombs? I thought. What about him throwing downfield? We can't get a deep bomb.
The new kickoff rule actually really helps Traylon Burks.
Big slot. He's going to be the power slot.
Yeah.
Oh man. Rest in peace, Traylon Burks. JJ, any honorable mentions, other late round quarterbacks, maybe like real dumpster diving guys that you want to throw out here, or is this your sort of go-to with Carr, Smith, and Levis?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like these are pretty dumpster divey, for the most part. But yeah, I mean, like
they are.
I'll throw Bo Nix out there at times too, and Drake May and stuff, just because I'm bullish on them starting May earlier, but even regardless of that, I think he's going to start towards the end of the year when we need him most anyway. But yeah, I mean, I think they're fine just because I'm going to skew younger players in those kinds of scenarios where there is a legit quarterback competition.
Yeah. Thanks for mentioning May. Once Pat and I get paid, we will send you a memo. So we're going now to the running back position. First one I want to talk about here is Jaylen Wright. I'll open with my take on Jaylen Wright. I think I have like one of the lowest IQ takes on the Dolphins backfield that I just can't get it out of my head. So please help me get this take out of my head. But I just look at Jaylen Wright going at 150 ADP, and he's the only third string running back that's within like 60 picks of him. And I get it, right? Like there's kind of two running back roles here. Like I get it. But like, this is a day 3 guy who's a third string running back on his team. Like, what's the difference between him and like Isiah Guerendo or Will Shipley or other guys that got drafted right next to him?
Both the guys ahead of him project far more than average to miss time relative to the average.
Is that true?
Backs.
Is that
I also think
yes.
like Isiah Guerendo is not even close to the kind of prospect that Jaylen Wright is. Like, I think that has to factor into this to some degree, right? Like I'm not going to factor all of it. And to be clear, he's not my number one exposed. Like, these are just randomly.
These are. I should have mentioned that at the top. These are not like in order. This is just a sampling of JJ's highest exposure.
But
yeah,
I think the difference between Wright and like a Guerendo is we've seen, number one, like, I don't think Devon Achane is necessarily Christian McCaffrey, right? So like with San Francisco in those scenarios, or even like Philadelphia in those scenarios, that's a strict handcuff thing. Yeah. I think that there is a legit possibility that Jaylen Wright just gets run in this offense without injury. Number one, right? Like if they dress these 3 guys and they're in garbage time, we're not going to want to play them in a season-long league when it's not very predictable. But I think there's definitely an opportunity for Jaylen Wright to give us some usable.
Achane did it in garbage time twice. 2 times. He scored 2 touchdowns from Mike White last year.
Yeah, right. I'm like we know that there's a rotation there, but also we're talking, his competition is an oft injured Devon Achane, which, look, I'm in Achane too. Like, I'm not trying to talk down, but I'm just speaking about the multiple outs here for injury. Like with Will Shipley, for instance, he needs 1 injury. There's only 1 guy that can get hurt. That's Saquon Barkley. With with Jaylen Wright, there's multiple outs. If Devon Achane goes down, Jaylen Wright gets a lot more work. If Raheem Mostert goes down, Jaylen Wright gets a lot more work. I mean, it happens in both cases. I think the Wright pick was 100% a Mostert pick than an Achane pick. Like he's most definitely, would play that kind of role more so than, what Achane brings to the table.
Raheem Mostert is the oldest running back in the NFL if you choose to classify Cordarrelle Patterson as a wide receiver.
Yeah, and not only that, but like last year happened for Mostert. I totally get it, but before last year, literally everyone was saying, "Why are you drafting Raheem Mostert? He's hurt all the time."
Raheem Mostert never had 1,000 yards in college. He was a sprinter at IUPUI. He had to bide his time at the 40. Like, we're talking about a guy who's basically not a real running back, really. Mostert is not.
He wasn't.
Right.
I think he
probably is now, but he definitely was not.
Right. But I mean,
he wasn't supposed to have the goal line role. Remember Jeff Wilson? Jeff Wilson was supposed to have the goal line role last year.
I also think the last thing I want to say, this is another scenario where like again, I don't want to lose sight of the prospect because I don't think that stuff is irrelevant at all. Right. Obviously, because I'm, working with prospects and stuff all the time, but I don't want to, part of the reason why Devon Achane, I was in on Achane last year, back padding moment, but I was in on Achane last year. And so much of the reason that I was in on him was because of the scheme fit for that player. Right. And that's exactly what we have with Jaylen Wright. Once again, we have a guy who can work in this McDaniel scheme. He's incredibly fast. He's got more size than Achane. I don't see why.
Heaviest running back on the roster, famously.
Yeah, right. I don't see why he couldn't get some work, maybe give us some usable weeks. And then obviously there's that contingent upside of multiple guys getting hurt then. And that's within an offense that has arguably the best run system that you can find throughout the NFL.
Yeah. I think those are all good points. The only pushback I have a little bit is when people say there are 2 running back roles in Miami, I get that and I agree with it, but it also could just be that Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane are both uniquely very talented players. And were there 2 running back roles in Miami the year before, or did that start last year when Devon Achane was added to the roster? Jeff Wilson played a little bit, but there weren't 2 guys breaking records, 2 years ago before Achane got on the roster. So I guess where I have a tough time with it is I know, if I'm taking Tyler Algier, who goes after Jaylen Wright, if I'm taking Elijah Mitchell, who goes way after Jaylen Wright, even if I'm taking Khalil Herbert, I just feel a lot better about if the starter gets injured, this guy projects for a huge workload. Again, the prospect stuff, I think that's super relevant, and JJ knows way more about that than I do. But Jaylen Wright got picked in the exact same range of the draft as Sion Vaki, Will Shipley, Ray Davis, Isaac Guerendo. So
one of those guys is going to be the league winner this year. So it could be Jaylen Wright, could be Sion Vaki.
What about Ray Davis as a comp, JJ?
Yeah, I love Ray Davis too. I that whole cluster of I love Kamani Vidal too. I love that cluster. This is what I was talking about earlier with Jalen Polk. This is one of the main reasons why I don't have more exposure to Polk is because that rookie running back cluster to me is a money zone. I'm getting part of the reason why I'm getting Wright is also because of just stacking and, if I get a Amari Cooper or something and I'm going to get a Deshaun Watson late and play that game a little bit. But to me, I just really like the cluster that's there. And I don't think we should lose sight, though, of the multiple injury outs for Wright. I think that does kind of catapult him above a player like a Khalil Herbert or something, where not only that, but Herbert, we now have NFL experience showing us that that teams are not using him as a pass catcher. Whereas I think that can still happen in Jaylen Wright's case, whether it be due to injury or not. Right. So it's more so me just looking at this as, do I think that he's a low floor pick? Yeah. I mean, I think that it could go relatively south, but I also think that there's a lot of upside here in one of the best offenses that you can find for a running back. He fits the mold of the kind of running backs that work within this McDaniel offense. You mentioned some of the other ones from the previous year. I don't think that I don't want to just look at draft capital and say Isaac Guerendo went in the same area as Jaylen Wright, because I do think that the type of prospect they are and the fit that they have in that offense and the type of development and where they're at in their development also matter. Guerendo might be a practice squad guy, like realistically, this year. Whereas I think I'm pretty confident that Jaylen Wright's going to be the RB3 on that team, and he could get some garbage time work.
That's Jeff Wilson erasure, but we'll move on here.
What about Vidal? Because I mean, that's one. Is I'm like in that range. The Wright, I'm not like super low on Wright. I think I'm at 4%, but I've been more swayed by the Vidal. Yeah, I'm at 9% Vidal. I've been more swayed by kind of the upside case there. I think both are pretty low floor bets, but like what I like about Vidal is without injury, could he take this backfield over? And I'm like, I think.
I have more Vidal than I do Jaylen Wright.
Okay.
So I Vidal's, I think my third, I mean, Sam has the screen, but like, I think he's like my third or fourth ish, highest exposed running back. But I agree. The Vidal thing is really interesting because it's kind of crazy to me that he doesn't go a little bit higher, knowing that, like, looking at his competition.
Well, we need confirmation. We need confirmation that he exists. And the Chargers beat writing scenario. They don't seem that interested in confirming.
They don't. But we see this kind of thing sometimes. I mean, no one. But is anyone even covering the Chargers? Do we like? Is like
some guys trying to get Corain to pay him to do it?
We joked that I would pay someone to cover the Chargers, and the guy's like, "I'm ready, man. I'm ready. You have access? Like, what? I'm not just gonna pay you to." It's like Google the Chargers.
No, you gotta hire that guy. Come on, someone's got to do it. You got enough money. Just come on.
It's strange to me though because like Gus Edwards hasn't seen more than 13 targets in a single season, and he's 29 years old. J.K. Dobbins is coming off an Achilles and has never stayed healthy. Like, why are we afraid of these two players? It doesn't really make any sense to me. And Kamani Vidal, if you want to look at a player who complements Gus Edwards really well, it's Kamani Vidal. I mean, he's a really good pass protector. That was one of his best traits entering the league. He's good at catching the ball out of the backfield. He's kind of like and I talked to Matt Waldman about this on Late Round Perspectives before the draft, and we both had a DeAndre Swift comp for him. Like, he's kind of a Swifty type player where he's super shifty. He's got speed. He's smaller, like he's shorter. He's like 5'7", 5'8". But I think that really complements, at the very least, a guy like Gus Edwards really well. And then again, the question is, what if he's just better? So yeah, the what if he's just better piece and he could just take over the backfield naturally. That's why I do like Vidal more than, a lot of those other guys that are in that cluster.
Yeah, he scares me because I'm like, there was someone in one of the Discords was like mentioning, I think it was Spike Week Discord, they mentioned that Isaiah Spiller was originally a Michigan recruit. And I was like, oh God. Because Vidal back. Because Harbaugh always wanted Spiller.
God, if Spiller becomes a thing, I'm gonna be so tilted.
That's gonna be so tilting.
The floor is like so gut-wrenchingly low, but like, who could be this year's James Robinson, this year's Philip Lindsay? Like, it's Vidal. Like, very clearly, it's Vidal.
That's estimate. You gotta go further for that. Vidal's gonna make the team.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think he's going to make the team. Vidal's going to be on the team and play. I get the worry. Don't get me wrong. Like, I understand because like there isn't much reporting going on. He's a day 3 running back. Yada yada yada. But like, the competition's pretty brutal in LA. Like, they're not good running backs, And I'm going to lean in on the talent and look at what the prospect model was saying, and it liked him a lot more than draft capital, and I'll lean into that. Where he goes.
Yeah, and. Again, I think on making the team, like he was, this is, again, probably a dumb point to make, but I do think there is a difference in terms of making the team of a sort of early round 6 versus like late round 7. Like, a lot of like the late round 7 guys, those are like real risks to making the team. Round 6 is certainly no guarantee, but usually those guys do at least make the team. So there's that. Let's move on here to Zach Charbonnet. Don't want to spoil it, but I think he's up near the top, JJ, of your highest exposures.
This is my highest exposed player in all of best ball right now. Is Zach Charbonnet.
Wow. All right, speak on that.
Which I feel like I'm kind of on an island with the Charbs take.
No, he's a great pick.
But it kind of comes down to a couple things. Number one, you have a coaching change, offensive coordinator change. That inherently in a backfield tells us that what if they don't use these backs the same way they've been using them, right? So what if they give Charbonnet a little bit more work than they did last year? But like down the stretch, they were giving Charbonnet more work even when Kenneth Walker was healthy. Like, it wasn't as drastic of a split as what we saw earlier in the season. The other thing with Walker and Charbonnet is that last year, and we kind of knew this going in, like, this is why I think and I said this whenever they drafted Charbs, like, I think the reason they drafted him was for the consistency. When Kenneth Walker's like this home run hitting back, Kenneth Walker prospect wise was like a James Conner type who, was just like a grinded out kind of player and could have a relatively high success rate, as you can see right there. And the success rate difference is like Charbs on a per rush basis. Now, this isn't totally apples to apples because, they play on different downs, they play different roles and stuff, but there's a lot of per rush metrics that actually kind of favored Charbs over Kenneth Walker last year. And so the point that the thing is, what I always tell people is, if there's a player from a projection standpoint that is sharing a backfield with someone else and he's being drafted at his projection, then that player is a good draft pick, right? Right now, Charbonnet, where he goes, that's basically where my projections have Zach Charbonnet, right? And there's obvious upside to that because the projections are working off of the assumption of what we've seen historically with the Seattle offense and how they split that backfield. There's contingent upside of if Kenneth Walker goes down, but then there's also the upside of what if they just like Zach Charbonnet a little bit more than Kenneth Walker? Now, I know that that's like crazy to say and everyone's going to disagree with me, but they're two very, very different running backs, and a style of Charbonnet just might be liked a little bit more. Like, what if Kenneth Walker is more of the change of pace guy, which realistically, that's kind of how they profile and the way that they've been performing. Kenneth Walker 2 years in the league, Zach Charbonnet 1 year and last year. I'm not saying that's the most likely outcome. Like, I still have Kenneth Walker ranked ahead of Zach Charbonnet. I'm just thinking about all the outcomes here. And that's why I keep drafting Charbonnet where he goes. Like, the other running backs in that range, I just don't see the same kind of upside that I do with Charbs because of the injury component.
You know what you could almost compare it to would be last year if you looked at the Texans backfield, Dameon Pierce and Devin Singletary.
Yeah, sure.
We have because
I'm still a Walker bull, so I need to send that back immediately. I mean, I don't care about success rate as it stands.
Pierce going higher than Walker, you can get in the 7th round now. Pierce we had to take in the 6th last year, so it's
Charbonnet will have some decent standalone value. Could and it kind of ties in, JJ, with your whole theory about the Seahawks just being a better passing offense, just more successful drives, higher success rate as a team. But Walker, I think, was better than Pierce ever was. But I think Charbonnet is fine just as a contingent click anyway.
Right. And look, so here, let me ask you guys this. So I know a lot of people are really high on like Jerome Ford, right? Because of the Chubb stuff. And, we saw Ford have at least a lot of upside, like per rush last year. We saw him like have some big plays. But like realistically, from an upside standpoint, I think Charbonnet has more upside than Jerome Ford does, because Jerome Ford, like I've been really like my feelings towards Ford. I feel like, again, I'm on an island with this too, but it's like we saw Jerome Ford last year without Nick Chubb and he was fine, but it's not like he was this like obvious league winning player. Whereas if Kenneth Walker gets hurt, Zach Charbonnet is a bell cow back for Seattle, right? And not only that, but you're still probably going to get some usable weeks out of Sharps. Like, I don't think that he's going to be a monster per se if Kenneth Walker, is healthy, but I think we're going to get some usability out of him where he could even pay off to some degree without the injury. But with the injury, if Kenneth Walker weren't in the picture, Charbonnet would be going in like the, I don't know, round 6, 7, like at least in like the Kamara range, right?
I think he'd probably, like Zamir White-ish range.
Yeah, sure. Like in the, in that, like in the giant 0 RB.
Next to the 20 other running backs right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, so Walker, I've been taking some, and he's like one of those players. He's actually kind of the opposite of the thing we talked about with Barkley early on, where like, I'm like so delighted to just take him in the middle of the 7th round now that I do it. But I've pretty much been out on Walker since he came in the league. And then I thought he was an overrated prospect. And then his rookie season I thought was pretty troubling. And then last year, Dameon Pierce came to mind because Dameon Pierce had a 33% success rate, which is terrible. Walker was at 32%. The only guys he finished ahead of were Josh Kelly, Jamal Williams, and Miles Sanders last year. Like, this dude is really, really inconsistent. So JJ's point that they might just like not like that seems very plausible to me. Like maybe they just hand more over to Charbonnet. I haven't been taking enough of even with the field, I wish I was overweight after hearing your case. What about him compared to Rico Dowdle?
That's a good one.
That is a good one. I think that usually that kind of selection depends on my build, right? Like if I am running back heavy, it's a lot easier to go Charbs in those scenarios because I know that floor wise probably a little bit better for Dowdle, but I think ceiling wise is better for Charbs. Like there aren't many running backs in that range, in my opinion, that at least have the kind of ceiling that Charbonnet could have because we know that he can be a bell cow back. Whereas I don't know if we're going to ever see that out of Rico Dowdle, right? And I say that similarly to like the Jerome Ford example. It's kind of similar to that, where it's like he's going to get us probably like if no one gets hurt, if nothing really changes, between the in the way that we're looking at things right now, like a guy like Jerome Ford will probably score more fantasy points than Zach Charbonnet, but the amount of fantasy points that Jerome Ford scores above Zach Charbonnet, to me, isn't going to be like needle moving. It's not going to be like so significant that I'm not even fading Ford. It's just an example. But
I am. I think Ford's one of the worst picks on the board. I have him 20 picks.
It's weird. Yeah. It's weird. It is weird to me though, that people have been calling Ford like a league winner when we literally saw what would happen if everyone in the backfield was hurt. And
he didn't win any leagues.
And he didn't win any leagues.
Or like 18.3 points in a ceiling game.
And now they have like Deontay Foreman and Nyheim Hines, and obviously Chubb can come back. And so it's like to me, it's Charbonnet, So yeah. I feel like he has standalone value because there are outs for him to have standalone value, but then there's obviously that contingent upside.
And the thing with Ford is that Ford, to me, when you think about the profile of what this guy's really offering, it's just a worse version of what you can get with like the Raheem Mostert pick, in the 90s, but or many other picks like that, a Zach Moss, James Conner, like some of these guys, Aaron Jones, Alvin Kamara, like on and on, where you're like, yeah, I have some worries about this player, how long they're going to have this role, but they have the role. But they could keep the role all year. Where Ford, I'm like, you're not keeping the role all year. I think Chubb's coming back to some degree by the end of the season. So it's a front-weighted bet. He's like expensive Chuba Hubbard. Expensive Chuba Hubbard is really what he is. Like, I don't understand why he goes where he goes in this environment. Where like you're telling me you couldn't find projectable touches before now?
Exactly.
Like they're free.
Right.
So
Donta Foreman might have the better projectable touches. Truly.
I mean, I
Who do you want in the Browns offense with a quarterback with a broken shoulder, the early down grinder, the guy weighs 230 pounds, or Jerome Ford?
No, I mean, look, I've been drafting way more Foreman than Ford. Period. But
I just don't really
part of that's cost, obviously.
JJ, so a couple of these guys coming from this range, and I know you like the rookies in this range, like how are you attacking that giant pocket of running backs? Because I often end up in that range. Like I'll tack on maybe one of these guys or two of them. But like I actually don't find myself needing running back so much in that range as much as like I might have in years past. But I'm also like feeling like, am I doing this wrong? Am I too tempted by these? Because these are dead zone backs that I'm taking, but they're not in the dead zone. They're in the 90s where there's no receivers left. So I'm like, okay, in the 80s and the 90s, I can take these guys and I don't even have to think about it.
What kind of guys are you referring to?
Like I'm referring to the giant block of dudes, like Najee Harris, Jaylen Warren, who I think is a little bit archetypally different than those guys. Zamir White, Brooks Conner is sort of a different archetype. Aaron Jones, Alvin Kamara, James Conner, Zach Moss, DeAndre Swift.
I usually go, I try to lean on the ambiguous backfields because I've done so much research on that. And, guys like Zach Moss, there's actually a lot of like market trends that point to Zach Moss being a decent pick this year, which is scary. Like 50-year backs do really well in that range. And I think the reason for that is like, there's a survivor bias and it's the same thing with like DeAndre Hopkins. So DeAndre Hopkins, wide receivers in like the wide receiver 3 to 4 range who are going the middle rounds, who are past year 10 in their NFL career, they hit at a really good rate. And you have to be like, well, why does that matter? Well, it's because they're still middle round picks after being in the league, after being, 32 years old or whatever. They're still middle round picks. And so there's something to that. The market's trying to tell you something, right? It's kind of similar with these like 5th-year backs where, they're not elite players, but they're still kind of in that range. They're still surviving. They actually hit at a pretty decent rate overall. But the main point I'll make is, I'm mostly just going after those ambiguous backfields. So like I get the Pittsburgh guys a lot. I've gotten a lot of Najee and Jaylen Warren. I'll go after the Cincinnati backs, mostly, Zach Moss is more so in that range, Chase Brown going a little bit later. I'll go after like a James Conner, especially if I am stacking, in a good stacking environment for him with Arizona and LA. The guys that I'm fading more, and I know Davis doesn't agree with me on one of them, but like I'm fading mostly Zamir White and I'm mostly fading Ramondre Stevenson.
I think those guys I think they're completely fine fades. I'm just betting on the Patriots. That's why I like Ramondre.
Yeah,
it's not even Ramondre specific.
The one thing about that area of backs is typically like you actually want to embrace the tandem backfields, the ambiguous backfields, because that tells us that if there's 2 running backs being drafted there, that means that team environment is likely pretty good, right? Because they're good enough for 2 running backs to go there. Whereas if you have 1 standalone back there, now this doesn't apply for rookies. I can get into that in a second if you guys are interested in it. But if there's a standalone back there, you have to ask yourself, why isn't Zamir White or Ramondre Stevenson going earlier, right? Like ask yourself that question. Your answer would probably be, well, Zamir White, we don't know about the pass catching. Well, that's a red flag. But also the offense sucks, right? Or is projected to not be very good. Same deal with Ramondre Stevenson. That's a problem. Like we want them to be in good environments to really hit a ceiling. The difference is, and this is one of the reasons why I've kind of let off on like a Trey Benson recently, is historically when you have 2 middle round running backs from the same team, when one of those running backs is a rookie, the veteran outperforms that rookie more frequent, like way more frequently. It's not a massive sample size, but I think the reason for that is when you have a rookie running back and he's standalone, like Jonathan Brooks, like he's probably projected to get a lot of work, but also he's probably pretty talented. So there's this combination that's happening there, right? Whereas if you have a tandem, the coaching staff might be like, we don't need to give Trey Benson all this work because we have James Conner. The only guy since 2014 who's worked out in that range was Kenneth Walker, and it's because Rashad Penny got hurt. So I do think that we're going to need a James Conner injury for Trey Benson to be relevant and to really, which could happen obviously because he gets hurt all the time. But I'd rather place my bets on like obviously Jonathan Brooks goes a little bit earlier, but like Brooks is set up a little bit better in that range. So that's kind of how I attack those middle round running backs. Is it's just based on like the market trends and these ambiguous backfields.
What about Jones and Kamara, Aaron Jones and Kamara? Because they would fit that Stevenson category.
It's really, really tough. It's really tough for them because the main difference, especially because those are even more traditional dead zone. But like Stevenson's dead zone, like if you're looking at like the RB positional rank where they're at and where they're being drafted. The interesting thing though is that like we want younger players in that rank. Like you want rookies, you want like 2nd-year players, like where Rashad White was last year. But with the veteran backs, if you can get guys who get 10+% target shares, they hit fine. So that's and I've been so hesitant to draft both of those guys. It's very scary drafting both Kamara and Aaron Jones, but I like them more than Stevenson because I fear, I mean, I do have the coaching staff change. Antonio Gibson's there. I don't know how special Ramondre Stevenson is as a pass catcher. And so I think Aaron Jones and Alvin Kamara are 2 of the best running back pass catchers of the last decade. Right. So like, I feel better and good about them having a role as that player at the very least. So that's the differentiator for me between them and a guy like Stevenson.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've wondered if I'm like because I'm taking Stevenson, White, Kamara. I got kind of out on. He like, what was the thing after training camp? He like left early or something.
Yeah, look,
he's holding out.
Holding out.
Trying to get a bigger contract as
I don't
Alvin
like that.
Kamara.
Yeah, I'm not like bullish. I'm certainly not bullish on Kamara and Aaron Jones. It's just I'm
bullish on Aaron Jones.
It's hard for me to be like overly excited.
I'm bullish on the whole offense. I'm a big KOC guy. I somehow ended up being a big JJ McCarthy guy. I mean, Aaron Jones, I kind of view him as like old Devin A-Chain. It's like the same bet. Like, yeah, he's going to play 10 games, but 8 of them are going to probably be pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I've been taking Jones. I'm not like super bullish, but I've been taking him.
Yeah.
But I am wondering, like, am I just too, like, you've tempted me? The market is tempting me with these dead zone backs that I was, ideologically opposed to, like, obviously when they're in like the 4th round, but then they're in the 5th and 6th. And last year, like, I was way out on Madison and that type of stuff. Damian Pierce, like, no thanks. But they're like, what about the 80s? And I'm like, 80s sound awesome.
Yeah. I think the dead zone definitely, because I always look at it in 2 ways. You have like the opportunity cost side, right, of drafting those guys, but there's also just how good these guys hit and how well they hit, right? And if you look at like RB2s, so like RB13 to RB24, like that general range, they do hit at I still consider like Josh Jacobs kind of like a dead zone type back to some degree. I know that he's, and even like you could argue like a James Cook is like a dead zone type ish back because of where that drop off kind of occurs. It's definitely a different running back market in general though this year. It's not just because of like where they go on Underdog. It's like how they're ranked and like how they're like where the list, how many tandems we have, how many ambiguous backfields we have, all that kind of stuff. And so I'm just leaning into the ambiguous backfield stuff because I know that historically that's where like league winners have really come from.
I like it.
And by that, just to make clear what you mean by that, you're saying you lean into teams where there's 2 running backs that are being drafted like by round 10 or some cutoff like that. Is that what you mean by the ambiguous backfield?
Yeah. So you don't want a running back, like for instance, market trend wise, David Montgomery, probably a little bit different in like a best ball environment, but David Montgomery is like a bad pick because he has a teammate that goes in the early rounds, right? It's just historically, we don't see those guys really exceed their expectation at a super, super high rate. But if you have 2 teammate running backs going in like the RB3, RB4 range together, and even like low end RB2, if you want to throw that in there as well. If they're from the same team, you want to attack those backfields because oftentimes injuries will happen or a guy emerges. The easiest example is the Leonard Fournette, Ronald Jones year, right? Where they were both kind of in that like 8th, 9th round range or whatever. And no one really knew who to go for and who to attack. People had their takes, whatever. Leonard Fournette just beat Ronald Jones. It wasn't even due to injury. He just outworked him, was just better than him. And so he became a league-winning player. That happens pretty frequently.
I prefer the Zach Moss, Devin Singletary Bills example personally, but that's just me.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. Well, I'm going to move here to wide receiver since we mentioned pretty much every running back in the NFL's name there.
I think we just did all 70 guys who are going to play this year.
Exactly. Let's hit quickly, and by quickly I mean probably 20 minutes.
JJ knows
Hollywood
ball.
Brown.
I mean, what more do you want him to say about Hollywood Brown? Guy knows
I knew
ball.
Davis was going to be with this
ball
one.
knowing.
It's kind of vibe. Hollywood's kind of a vibes pick this year.
He is,
and it's the vibes are good. The vibes are good.
It's really weird because his like per route numbers are getting worse year by year. Like he's
is he also getting older at the same time?
Guys,
No, that's
I
don't think so.
If you had to show up to your job to go play for a 4-win Cardinals team with Josh Dobbs, how hard would you be trying?
Well,
I think we can forgive him for dogging it a little.
He's seen about a 22.7% target share per game rate in each of his last 4 seasons. I know the competition hasn't been like amazing, but obviously Rashid Rice, will probably be suspended for a chunk of the season. I think that if you look at the Kansas City wide receivers too, the roles they play can be pretty specific and pretty obvious how they might deploy these guys. Where like, I think year 1, Xavier Worthy could be a really big field stretcher for them. Give him some cute little touches close to the line of scrimmage as well. Rashid Rice, we know how they used him in that like low A dot role last year, which I think is what Rashid Rice is. He's a really good yards after the catch wide receiver. Travis Kelce will do Travis Kelce things, but Hollywood Brown's the one wide receiver on this team that can run a full route tree, like hypothetically. And so I think that he could end up being their one. Going back to the market trend stuff, year 6 wide receivers do very, very well, similar to like these like year 5 running backs, where it's just like the survivorship idea where they're still getting drafted where they're getting drafted. I did look into this a little bit and see if like had anything to do with them changing teams after their rookie deal / 5th year option. And it really didn't even have anything to do with that. It was just a really random, weird trend. But I do think that there is like this survivor aspect to it where these guys are still in the prime of their careers, right? Like they're like year 6 wide receivers are still not quite, on the downturn of the age curve, right? And then you hit that curve, you get into like year 7, year 8, year 9, and you start to, but if you survive that, like a DeAndre Hopkins, that's why those players then start to emerge and outplay ADP at such a good rate. So Hollywood Brown's in the right kind of area from like an age perspective too. He's attached to Patrick Mahomes. I think he's the most complete wide receiver on the team, so I'm drafting him.
He is the most complete wide receiver on the team. Like Worthy and Rice are gimmick players. It's a good gimmick, but Brown is the one who can kind of fill in wherever based on how the other guys are playing.
Yeah. And I don't think
with that trend, JJ, was that like what ADP, like what kind of value was the market having to assign for a player to be part of that?
Yeah, wide receiver 25 to 42 was the grouping. Which to me is a money group this year. Like based on the trends, because some of the other trends are like if you had a yards per route run the previous season above 2, that was another check that box, and that's like DeAndre Hopkins, but there's Keenan Allen's part of that. Like there's a lot of good, solid like post year 10 or post year 9, good previous season numbers, or guys in year 6, like Terry McLaurin I think is in the year 6 bucket as well. There's just a lot of good wide receivers in that range this year that fit a lot of those market trends.
So by ADP, like Brian Thomas is the wide receiver 45, Deontay Johnson the wide receiver 44. Yeah. So kind of that like that 6-7 turn group would be the end of it. I guess my concern with as it applies to Brown then would be, are we just double counting Mahomes? Because there's no way Brown's is in this group if he's not on the Chiefs. There's just no way.
No, I agree.
He'd be with Sutton or whatever if he was still on the Cardinals.
I think situationally,
but we don't live in that universe, Pat. Yeah. We live in this universe.
Yeah, we got a triple count Mahomes.
Guess where I would take Cortland Sutton if he signed a year
3rd round.
Exactly. Yeah. It's great. It's just I feel like fantasy football is pretty hard, and there are things that we can not know. There are elements of the game that we just have to guess. We simply do not have to guess. The Chiefs have laid it all out for us. They've said, we know it's not a way that we can win. They let their best defensive player go in free agency. They spent a 1st-round pick on the fastest player in the history of the NFL Combine. Pretty clearly, Hollywood Brown is making a bet on himself here. Like he got less money than Tyler Boyd, I believe. Like wide receiver money is going crazy. He took
that's
a 1-year
That's
deal.
not a bull signal to me.
I don't think that's not true. That's definitely not true either.
Well, it's also, I mean, it was also, I just
It's
lied.
also not true.
I just
It's also
lied.
not. I did want to bring this up because I do think like a big part of the Hollywood Brown discussion hinges on how you interpret this 1-year, $6.5 million contract. Because on the one end, you can say that's the same amount of money that like Kendrick Bourne, Devin Duvernay, Josh Reynolds got. Like he was in the range of those guys. He was not in the range of Curtis Samuel, who got 15 million, Gabe Davis, who got 24 million, Darnell Mooney, they got 26. So like that's scary on the surface. But if you interpret it as Marquise Brown, maybe he had that Curtis Samuel contract on the table. Maybe he had that Gabe Davis contract on the table from, say, the Patriots. And he said, screw that. I'm doing 1 year with the Chiefs. I'm hitting free agency next year, and I'm going to get a bag next year when I'm still only, 28 years old.
It's
like
literally
you definitely
what Juju
can.
did.
It's what Juju did.
It's Juju did it, and Juju didn't even play particularly well, but he got 3 years, $33 million.
Exactly. So that's the thing. I think the contract-based analysis that's fading Brown is like missing the reason for why he took this contract.
Maybe.
I think that's the problem with, I think that like, I'm not trying to dismiss contract-based analysis, but I think that is the problem with contract. Like we don't know the opportunity cost side, right? Like we don't know what
we shouldn't assume he just had the Jaguars contract sitting there and he turned it down. Like we can't just say that he could have had the Jaguars contract.
It
wasn't a
Craig,
we're not saying that.
Believe in something on this earth, dude. You can't just and this is what I choose to believe.
If he got the Gabe, so this is where I would push back with the contract stuff. What if he got the Gabe Davis contract, which we should, I would say, kind of a baseline, feel better about, right? He got the Gabe Davis contract. If he went to the Jaguars in the Gabe Davis role, are we taking this guy ahead of Brandon Cooks?
Absolutely not. No.
Oh yeah. No, I think we would take.
Why do I have to take him in the 5th round?
Hollywood Brown on any of the other 31 NFL teams doesn't.
I would take him pretty high on the Jags if he got the Gabe Davis contract.
He's better than Gabe Davis.
I mean, the Jags didn't seem to think so. They had the opportunity to sign both.
I think the bottom line with him for me is I think he's the most well-rounded receiver on the team, because I actually have concerns about like Rashid Rice as a wide receiver, not like I think he's very, very good, especially at what he does. And
Right.
if he can get peppered the way that he did at the end of last year, sure, he's going to be great. Like he's a second round pick if that's the case. But I think there are some route limitations with him, and we saw that last year. They just used him in the proper way. Whereas I don't have that feeling. Not that I would take Brown above Wright. That's not what I'm saying. But like the idea of him being able to play everywhere for Kansas City, kind of be a plug holes for them, it's kind of intriguing.
Yeah. I will say on Rice, like for all the people, and I'm one of these people, for all the people who evaluate wide receiver talent by just filtering for yards per route run, I don't think they fully realize like how weird of a player Rashid Rice is. And he's
Bizarre.
like, he's not the normal player that averages like 2.4 yards per route run. Like he's got one of the weirdest route trees. He's one of the weirdest players in the NFL. And I don't think people fully realize that. So,
But I had viewed some of that as upside with Rice because his first read targets were pretty low. And a guy with a really high targets per route run typically has a high first read target.
I don't think you're wrong. Yeah, I don't think you're wrong. I'm just saying that like if we're looking at like of course, I mean he was a rookie last year. Of course there's like room for improvement with a guy like Rice, which is the main reason why I think he would just go well above a guy like Hollywood if he were not suspended.
For sure. Yeah.
Let's talk Shaheed here. We already touched on Carr, but curious, JJ, are you in on both Shaheed and Olave, or are you specifically in on Shaheed in terms of pairing him with Carr?
I don't get like super, super cute in round 2 either until the later parts of round 2. So I have it, I have a relatively okay amount of Olave just because I think he's a good player and I'm bullish on the Clint Kubiak shift. But Rashid Shaheed, stupid good rookie season yards per route run. Speaking of folks who look at yards per route run. And then last year it still wasn't that bad. Like it was still fine. I think that if you look at the Kubiak offense and all this movement we're going to see, Rashid Shaheed could be one of the biggest like beneficiaries of that, where they can scheme him out, get him deep because he's probably the best deep threat that they have. And so I'm just targeting him and locking him in. I mean, last year he gave us a decent amount of usable weeks. I think he was like top 36 or so in like 15-point performances. I think that going from like a 15% target share, he could see a 19-20% target share in this offense. I don't think anyone would be that surprised given the competition. Like Michael Thomas, when active last year, actually, I didn't realize it until like I looked back. Like his target share numbers were like not that bad. Like he was seeing a decent amount of work in the offense, and that target share being gone is actually kind of significant for a player like Shaheed. So I've been getting him a good bit.
Shaheed is also just like such a classic guy who does that kind of fun rookie season, and then like Robert Foster or who's the guy that was on the Bills last year that did nothing? Deontay Hardy. Like these guys just kind of come and go, but the fact that he didn't,
yes, exactly,
is pretty exciting to me.
Exactly.
Like he just spent year 2 solidifying a real role in an NFL offense.
Yeah,
I like that.
Yep.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to call out: the stats actually for Olave, not Shaheed, but I've been looking into sort of the motion rates, and Chris Olave on a pretty small sample, but last year he was had the biggest discrepancies in terms of his yards per route run when there was pre-snap motion on the play versus when there wasn't. And the Saints were just running like such a shockingly low level of pre-snap motion. Like for instance, Tyreek Hill on his routes, 80% of the time he's running a route, there's some kind of pre-snap motion on the play. For Chris Olave, that's down at 15%. And Chris Olave's yards per route run on those plays, the few plays where the Saints ran motion, jumped from 1.8 to 3.5. So it's just, it's insane. Like, again, that's a small sample size. I wouldn't project that, but I do think there is this like untapped upside of Saints have a modern offensive coordinator that can just get, because these guys last year got none of the schemed up easy stuff. It's all like deep down the field targets for these guys, and you don't have to use your top 2 wide receivers like that.
My only concern with Shaheed is the price rise has been so significant. He used to,
it's gotten nuts.
Yeah. And my question really is this related to the player, or just that like you get boxed out at wide receiver so easily? Because we've seen Josh Palmer rocket up. We've seen some other guys rocket with Curtis Samuel, Tyler Lockett. Like that whole pocket of receivers has come up the board. So like I'm not getting as much Shaheed as I used to.
Same.
I would like if he would, if he falls another 10, 12 picks or whatever, I'm very happy to take him at a high clip again.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat where it's like if I'm in a pinch now is when I'm forcing it with Shaheed, or I'll just let it come to me naturally if like for whatever reason he's not getting picked up. But my exposure to him right now is based on June basically, like when his price was a lot better.
Yeah,
Reeves,
he was a huge
Reeves
value.
loves Shaheed. I streamed with Reeves the other day, and he was just like prepping me.
I mean,
He was just ready to click.
We hate to say it, but he is like a better in best ball player. Like,
Totally.
He is.
Yeah.
It's just
He's also better in Scott Fishbowl. I think he was wide receiver 9 last year.
JJ, I know you're new to fantasy or best ball analysis, but that's a phrase from like 2021. You're not allowed to say that.
yeah.
Because we all got bored of it became overplayed out.
You have to say wide band player now. That's how you're supposed to
You
say
can get
it
away
now.
with it there.
Yeah. Let's end here. A couple exciting players, and then you threw. I had to expose
Robinson.
you.
Big
Demarcus
Demarcus Robinson came
Robinson
for
here.
JJ, dude.
Oh man.
What, are you
Let's hear
shocked that Demarcus Robinson's on the list?
Yeah, I'm shocked that the year 9 breakout in the Rams offense is like Reeves made me take him the other day. It's like, look, you can't fool me, Demarcus Robinson. I'm familiar with your game.
Honestly, the reason Demarcus Robinson has relatively decent exposure for me is strictly stacking. Strictly.
Yeah,
like
he's
it's
in
just
a great Week 17 game.
It's a scenario where I like Arizona. I don't mind LA, the Rams. And so he's always just kind of sitting there where, whenever you're doing drafts and you're like, it's like round 15, round 16, and you're like, I don't even need more rounds anymore. Like that. Yeah. That's like and then I just use him as a stacking partner. But yeah, I mean, like down the stretch, we saw him basically getting like a 20% target share per game rate, in the Rams offense. And I think the difference between him and like Tutu, and the reason why I would lean his way pretty heavily is because he's a really good run blocker. And I think the Rams care about that deeply in the way that they started running that offense. And I think that's why he's going to be out there in 11 personnel. We know it's a heavy 11 personnel team. There's some contingent upside with Puka and Cooper Kupp. So I don't think he's going to be this massive league winner, but I'm fine with drafting him.
Now, Sam, you were famously in on Alan Lazard. So is this run blocking argument really getting you going?
Yeah, it's getting me fired up. Devontae Parker, Alan Lazard, those type of guys. The guaranteed routes guys, those guys never.
I think
fail.
Demarcus Robinson is just Van Jefferson, who ran hot for 3 weeks.
I did want to say, like, should we be a little scared by how like quickly Sean McVay just discarded of Tutu in favor for Demarcus Robinson as like are we sure?
He didn't really though. If you look back at it, Tutu actually kind of kept playing the same amount, even during even during before he got injured. So Tutu got injured in week 14, and that's when the big routes happened. But for most of the season, he was still playing.
Yeah, he was kind of like quasi benched in like week 12. Correct. But yeah, actually, I don't know how banged up he was, but weeks 14, 16, 17, and 19, he played in all those games and had less than 8% of snaps in all those games. One of those was a playoff game too.
Yeah, I also think that Sean McVay is someone who just generally like has his dudes, and then he has like, look at what happened with Cam Akers. It's just like if you're not vibing, or if you're not someone that I like what I'm seeing, like you're done, right? And that obviously would be like the Kyron Williams argument. I just think that they might like they did the Blake Corum thing for a reason. But regardless, I think there's a reason Demarcus Robinson was playing more. And I think it goes beyond what we're seeing with his actual production. And since they run a lot of 11 personnel, I'm intrigued.
Yeah. I'm just saying, my point was like, what if just like Tyler Johnson or like Jordan
Whittington?
Yeah, like what if one of these guys just like
people forget there was another NFL wide receiver on the roster with Jonathan Brooks, A.D. Mitchell, Xavier Worthy, and Jatavian Sanders. People forget.
Yeah, it's just like Demarcus Robinson. I get he had that stretch last year, but I don't know. I have been like, if I have Stafford, I'm obviously taking Demarcus Robinson. I'm not like ideological about it by any means, but I just don't know. Like he's just been so bad for so long, and he had like his first good stretch ever last year. I don't know, man. But I definitely get his role was so solid.
I don't have strong conviction about Demarcus Robinson, to be clear. Like I do not. I know that we're talking about.
Well, he's on the chart here as your third favorite player in the NFL. What are you talking about?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean Demarcus Robinson. It's like I said at the top. He's very much like the other two wide receivers. I'm drafting standalone and being okay with it. This is a very much a stacking related pick.
You got to be careful with giving Sam info because I was talking about Darnell Mooney recently on a podcast and he got confused and thought I was talking about Kyle Pitts.
Oh no, that was intentional misinformation.
I know it's intentional.
Crane had a clip where he was like, "What? We're just supposed to pretend that everyone who had 1,000 yards in 2021 is just still good somehow?" And I was like, "Are you saying that about Darnell Mooney or Kyle Pitts, buddy? Because it's the same thing." Man. All right, let's finish here. Speaking of Kyle Pitts, let's finish here with tight ends. Kyle Pitts is not on this list.
JJ knows ball again. JJ knows ball part 2.
Mark Andrews.
Such a good pick.
It's kind of crazy to me. Like he scored more points per game last year than the year prior. His ADP's fallen. He saw a lot more red zone work with Todd Monken last year. His yards per route run year over year was basically identical. Maybe it's the injury that people are afraid of. I don't see the reason why. I'm smashing this.
I think part of it is that people we got promised, and I was doing some of the promising that we were moving away from the Greg Roman offense to Todd Monken, and we were going to see this more aggressive, pass oriented offense. Maybe they're not going to be super pass heavy, but they're not going to be afraid. And then they had this elite defense. So we never really got the pass volume.
And Gus Edwards kept scoring.
That's
all
been
touchdowns.
the problem. That to me has been the problem with the way that people are viewing Baltimore is that they're looking at overall pass rate and not realizing that they were more pass heavy, in neutral environments and
relative to situation.
Right. It's just that, and I don't think we should just assume because we know regression just naturally happens for teams year over year with how good they are, and I don't think we should assume that Baltimore is going to they're going to be a good team, but we shouldn't assume that the game scripts are going to go the same way that they did last year. And Andrews was banged up last year. This isn't, it's not like he was fully healthy and they didn't do anything. They also didn't do anything on wide receiver this offseason. So,
they brought Bateman back.
Yeah, they got Bateman. They
big contract extension for Bateman. The relentless Rashad Bateman hype every offseason is. I fall for it every year. So
every year,
it's working.
Him still,
Yeah.
I'm still getting Bateman right now.
Why would we stop drafting?
You have to, if you're a fantasy analyst, you have to. And then you go and you check out the ESPN ADP, and you're like, oh, all these buddies in my home league are so dumb, letting Rashad Bateman slip all the way to the 15th round.
I promise you, I won't be dumb enough to take Rashad Bateman in my home league this year for the first time.
This year I won't. Yeah, this year I won't. I still will take Marvin Mims though.
Oh. Marvin Mims is just a good pick. I mean, come on.
We don't have enough time for that, but this one's not controversial. This one's I think slightly more interesting. Pat Freiermuth here as I think your highest or maybe second highest exposure tight end in what you sent me, JJ. Mm-hmm. Curious the case here. I definitely see the lack of target competition there. Anything else, market trends related that you have to say on Freiermuth?
Yeah, late round tight ends, you want good prospects. He was a decent enough prospect, but the bigger point is, I think people are afraid of Freiermuth because of Kyle Pitts and what Arthur Smith did with Kyle Pitts. But if you look, Kyle
Pitts is just bad. So
yeah, I like to look at coaching trends a little bit at a little bit of a higher level. Then looking at the individual player and you have to layer in personnel obviously, but taking a step back a little bit, Arthur Smith with a wide variety of players in Tennessee and then in Atlanta, his teams have ranked 8th, 4th, 4th, and 1st in tight end target share over his 5 years of being OC and head coach. And if you look at Pittsburgh right now, it's George Pickens, and it's not a whole lot going on outside of George Pickens. I really think that Pat Freiermuth could see a 20% target share in this offense pretty easily based on how they've deployed, how Arthur Smith has deployed tight ends in the past. I know that's not going to be a very pass-heavy offense, so I'm not saying that that'll convert to even 100 targets per se. But to me, he gives you a nice floor to be flexible with how you attack tight end. Like you could use him in 2 tight end builds. You could use him in 3 tight. Like he just goes in a point in a part of the draft where, I think the cost is right. And again, it gives you that flexibility with how you're sort of attacking your team build, because you can go in a lot of different directions. Like I've had plenty of just like Freiermuth and Musgrave builds or something, right? And it allows you to have that flexibility, because I think he does have a good floor, but I also think the ceiling is kind of not being recognized right now.
Yeah, I love the like Bowers plus Freiermuth, or like Njoku plus Freiermuth.
Yeah,
that's where I feel like a lot of people are talking about elite tight end. I guess I like elite tight end this year for sure. I'm of the opinion though that you don't need to force it, because I really like the Kittle obviously still goes somewhat early, but I really like the Njoku, Bowers, and then Freiermuth grouping, and I feel like if I wait and get 2 of those guys, I feel really good about that. So yeah, that's been my kind of get out of jail free card at tight end, the Pat Freiermuth selection.
Yeah, I really liked Freiermuth heading into last year, and then last year was concerning to me. It was pretty disappointing, and then you're like, okay, I'm investing in a Arthur Smith offense. That's never that fun. But the stuff with the wide receiver too, just like not really existing. They're like hyping Calvin Austin.
I heard Van Jefferson's name, and I was like, I probably am too low.
Yeah, they talk about like signing a star free agent wide receiver, like that exists. Like that's what the beat, right? They're like, we got to bring in like a veteran alpha wide receiver. Like, who are you talking about?
It's July, man. That's not.
Yeah, free agency already happened. Like, what do you mean?
So
I mean, the only out would be like an Ayuk trade, and I just don't see. I haven't really bought into, because there's been like really strong rumors of Ayuk to Pittsburgh and stuff, and it's like, this doesn't fit. Like Arthur Smith doesn't care about wide receivers. You kidding me? He just needs one alpha, and that's fine. Like this is not that dissimilar to what we've seen in the past with Arthur Smith offenses. And at the very least, the top guys in those offenses, like we can say what we want about Kyle Pitts, like his target shares have still been relatively fine. Like they're not like for the position and for the type. We can say that they misused him, sure, but they're also going to use Pat Freiermuth in a much more traditional tight end role, as opposed to how they deployed Kyle Pitts. Like that's the big difference to me.
That's the big difference. Because I mean, like you want the play action stuff, you want the boot stuff, right? Like you want Pat Freiermuth running free in, down the middle of the field, right? Like Pitts, him being a big wide receiver isn't great in a system where only one wide receiver really gets good targets. So I was a little bit nervous at the very beginning of the offseason with Darnell Washington maybe getting some of that traditional tight end stuff, but I haven't heard really any buzz on him.
Yeah,
so that's another. Yeah,
he's a lineman.
I
think they just really like Freiermuth too. Like he's just a really solid player. And last year he was banged up last year too. So I think that could also play into why he did what he did.
Yeah. I think the last thing I'll say on the Steelers in general, but applies to Freiermuth, is like I think a lot of people see like Arthur Smith plus Russell Wilson and Justin Fields like disgusting. I want no part of the passing game there. Like remember the comp to last year was Matt Canada with Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph, and I think that's upgrades across the board. Like say what you want about Russ and Arthur Smith, but I'm taking those guys into battle before I'm taking Matt Canada and Kenny Pickett into battle. So yeah, even if they're not great, like his efficiency could look a lot better if they're just better than like one of the lowest baselines in the league.
Credit to Arthur Smith and Russell Wilson for finding a place that they could team up and create an upgrade.
Yeah.
Like they're like Arthur Smith is about to get rehabilitated, dude. Arthur Smith is going to give us enough points to Pickens and Najee and Warren and Freiermuth. People are going to be like, I don't know.
But
Seems
guys,
all
like,
right. Maybe we were being unfair.
My hot. I mean, maybe it's hot, but like, I don't think he's that bad of an offensive coordinator.
I don't think he is either.
For this situation, especially. Like,
I agree.
My stance has always been like, if Pittsburgh isn't going to rebuild, because they just don't do that. If they're not going to rebuild, you probably should get an Arthur Smith type coordinator where you're going to run a ton of play action, get guys down the field, and then lean on your tandem running backs that are both pretty like decent players, right? Like I think it could work. And I think Russell Wilson's actually kind of the cheap quarterback that you would want in a scenario like that. So that's part of the reason why, like, I'm not like, I haven't been like drafting Pickens like crazy or anything like that. That's not, Freiermuth has been my target more. So with the running backs, obviously, but then in the passing game, it's mostly been Freiermuth.
Are you attacking the quarterback at all?
Yeah, actually, I haven't. I know that you guys are Fields people, right? Yeah, I'm I'm on Team Russ, man. I know that I think Russ is going to start every game this year. Like,
wow.
I don't think everything out of Pittsburgh has been pretty strong on the Russ side.
Yeah, but I think it's pretty much like you're reading the same press release, over and over.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, more than likely.
Those beats got handed something.
Sure.
Like.
But I don't know. I Justin Fields, I just think he has problems as a passer. The Steelers are always in it. Like, even when the schedule says they shouldn't be in it or like whatever, like they're always in it. And again, I think this fit with Russ and Arthur Smith is not that bad. So I'm okay. Like I've actually drafted, I think last week I drafted a Hurts Russell Wilson team. And that was it.
JJ, that's it. A lot of our listeners, a lot of people in the best ball community, they're really going to hate to hear that drafting the only backup quarterback that gets drafted in fantasy is a bad idea. They're going to hate to hear that. So
we're going to have to tell Pete that this was when NCAA was released because the numbers just tailed off.
Yeah. But yeah, seriously, on the Fields Russ thing, I'm fully converted into a DraftKings drafter now because Underdog's banned in my state. When you have 20 rounds, you are thinking about those guys a lot more than I think you are with 18 rounds. And I have been sort of like just tie breaking based on what I need in my build. Like if I'm really weak at quarterback and I just need starts, like I want the certainty of starting in the playoffs, I take Russell Wilson. If I feel like I have a limp ass like Derek Carr plus whatever team and I need the upside, I go with Justin Fields. So that's my honest take. He
adds a little fun to a quarterback room. Russ, especially in 20 rounds.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah. Couldn't agree more about just slapping a Fields Band-Aid on. It's just like, sure, you're not going to win. It's not going to convert to any points. It's the same thing as taking TJ Hawkinson when you're totally struck out at tight end. Like, it's not going to work out. Modern medicine's not going to save his leg. But at least you can look at it and be like, you could tell yourself a Week 17 story pretty easily.
If you have Tua and Bryce Young, you're just gonna feel better if you take Justin
You are
Fields.
just gonna
feel better.
You're gonna lose anyway. So part of this is about mental health. It's about how you feel after the draft. And
couldn't agree more that it's better for my mental health when I at least look at Fields on the screenshot.
All right, JJ, I promise you 2 hours max. We're at the 2 hour mark. Thanks so much for joining us. Please let the people know what's going on at late round quarterback, what else you have going on. I know the Becoming a Best Ball series this offseason, that's been great. Tell the people what you got going on.
Yeah, check out the Late Round Fantasy Football podcast feed. You can get the Becoming a Best Ball Bro series in there. That's been really fun. Corain came on. We chatted. I think you were the first guest I had. And yeah, I mean, it's just been fun, like learning from, the best of the best out there. Hopefully I do you guys right and I perform well this year when games start. But yeah, you check out lateround.com also if you were interested in any of the trend stuff that I talked about. That's littered throughout the draft guide, which you can purchase on lateround.com.
Yeah, and the best of the best going on that show. Pat's been on, Davis and I have not, so very, very curious there. Davis, tell the people what you've got going on with your marathon streams.
Peter's coming on tomorrow at noon. And if Underdog, in fact, launches their college football contests in time, there will be a college football stream before that. So there'll be 2 streams on the YouTube tomorrow.
Awesome. And Crane, leg up.
Yeah, I'm planning a stream with Eric Froton this week to talk the college football tournament on Underdog. So that'll be fun.
It's time, baby.
Yeah, I'm going to have to learn a lot.
I was gonna say you don't play college football DFS, so you're gonna be learning lots of names.
Yeah, I'm way behind, so it'll be fun because it's like I'm kind of in the shoes of many of the listeners. Hopefully,
God, I am just hoping and praying the prize pool. Like, can we get 100K to first would be amazing. 50K to first would be fine though.
You should start a new podcast series called Becoming a College Football Best Ball Bro.
Where do I get my ideas?
That's what Kitchen will be launching that next week.
and no one will be able to find it. No
one will be. Yeah. you will be able to find his appearance on Chess Liam's pod promoting it.
All right, guys, it was a ton of fun. We'll be back next week, as always, on this channel for another episode of ADP Chasing. Until then, enjoy your summer.